The future of Seoul depended on one man, the head of the Jungwon Guild, Jang Shi-wan. He was ready for the final fight, but his opponent, Shin Kang-hoo, was not going to give up so easily. They stood opposite each other as the guild leader loudly declared that all this suffering was the enemy's fault, that because of a monster like him, the world is plunging into darkness. But the opponent just smirked. Does his rival seriously consider himself the voice of justice? Virtue flared up with rage. The whole nation rallied around. People believed in him, and as long as their faith was with him, he would not lose. Concentrating all his strength, the warrior delivered a powerful blow, and the enemy fell to his knees. A deafening roar exploded in the air, and the crowd roared, chanting one word, "Kill!" The winner was ready to carry out justice. He gathered all his power into one final attack, and now his enemy was thrown back, his body bleeding. Everyone shouted with joy, believing that peace would now come. But suddenly the sky turned an ominous scarlet color. A giant hand extended out from it, and the jubilation instantly turned to horror. Only one person looked at what was happening with a smile, Chang Shu-hwan. After all, the Demon King has finally descended, and now real peace will begin. But the defeated one had not yet fallen, and through the blood and pain he whispered that this world was nothing more than the beginning of tyranny. The warrior turned sharply to him. He was already tired of fighting with this incompetent. But at that moment he didn't care. The guy already looked crazy, and the next moment everything disappeared. However, this was not reality, but a story created by the author. In this story, the hero turned out to be not a savior, but a servant of the ancient Demon King. This novella was born from the writer's personal experience from his student years, when he encountered real power, capable of hiding the truth and turning the concepts of good and evil upside down. But the audience didn't like it because the ratings were low and the reviews were full of indignation. The creator turned off the computer with a heavy heart and collapsed on the bed. The chaos in the room reflected the chaos in his head. The angry comments haunted him, but he no longer intended to change the ending, and even in his sleep he was troubled by anxiety. He found himself in a strange place, a cold stone floor, noise and swearing all around. Someone beat someone brutally. The boy didn't understand why the dream seemed so real. He tried to intervene in the fight, but he also began to be brutally. The guy even felt pain, although he seemed to be in a dream, but the guard was pulled away and they tried to calm him down. Suddenly a boy, covered in bruises, rushed towards him and called him Kang-hoo. Is he really the very hero of his story? This meant that the author found himself in his own world, and his body gave way. He fell to his knees, feeling a strange energy. The ability to absorb mana began to manifest, and he realized that it was an innate sensitivity like the protagonist's. Looking at the reflection in the puddle, it was clear that the boy was now Shin Kang-hoo. This means he knew what awaited him in the future. The Demon King is already approaching, and if nothing is done, his fate is sealed. Of course, if he had been given another form, perhaps Shu-hwan, the world would have loved him. And so there are only 5 years left until the coming of the Demon King. And if he doesn't change the plot, he will die a miserable death. But now he had a chance. As expected, along with the new body, he received all the knowledge of his character. Kang-hoo was still at level 10, but with disgusting stamina. He regretted that he had ended up in such a guise, but he understood that he could still change everything. At that moment, a familiar guy, the one who was being beaten, ran up to him. He asked worriedly if everything was okay and suggested a break. But the young man replied that no one pauses in this place. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. It was a mine controlled by the criminal organization Eclipse, where recruits hunters were lured and used to extract mana stones. A friend casually suggested running away, but the fugitive in this prison is a suicide. Kang-hoo ordered him to forget about the idea and just keep working. All he could do was warn him. This guy was created in the image of himself, that is, the author, so his fate is sealed. It was impossible to change history. A little time passed, and suddenly Kang-hoo heard his friend being scolded by the guards. It turns out the guy did try to escape. The young man watched as the guard coldly thrust the blade into the idiot's body. The crowd was stunned with shock, and Kang-hoo only sighed because his warning was ignored. The mercenary cynically asked if he was going to make the same scene. And even if he decides to do so, he's guaranteed the same death. But instead of being scared, Kang-hoo only replied indifferently that the only thing that worried him now was the toilet. The guard saw him off with a sneer and asked if he had wet himself from fear. He was given 60 seconds to do all his needs, otherwise they wouldn't stand on ceremony with him. Finding himself in a room filled with the smell of death, the young man saw a pile of corpses. While the guard counted down the seconds, he began to draw a bloody pentagram. Kang-hoo knew he was being watched. The warden began to demand that he hurry up. But Kang-hoo continued to summon the time robber. He asked, asking what he was not interested in. How could an ordinary low-ranking person summon someone who stands beyond the dimensions? Suddenly the room was filled with a blinding light and icy air filled the space. The dimension robber has been summoned. Creatures from beyond the worlds do not like to be disturbed, but this strange guy intrigued the robber. In response to the call, he allowed him to reveal his abilities to the fullest extent, and the status was updated, and all skills were pumped up to the maximum. Just at that moment, the door swung open. The guard burst inside, blazing with anger, but before he could blink, Kong Hu was gone. Just a second ago, he was in front of him, and now he was behind him. Using instant teleportation, the young man found himself behind the guard. Grabbing the nearest sharp object, he cut his throat with one precise movement. The dimension robber watched the events and was more than pleased. This guy was interesting, and the contract was signed. Kang Hu took the weapon, put on the uniform of the dead guard, and went outside. The first stage of the escape is complete. The second is fire, and the third breakthrough through the main gate. As soon as the flames broke out, the guards rushed about, trying to figure out where it came from. The fire department was called and panic set in. Everyone acted according to instructions, which meant they split up. The young man was already sitting in one of the vehicles, disguised as a second-rank overseer. The cars rushed towards the main entrance. Many might have thought that this was an ideal escape route, since the area was practically unguarded and the route itself was confusing. However, in reality, it was teeming with traps and only a few dared to pass through it. When they passed the checkpoint, the guards entered a secret code that was not available to ordinary prisoners. This meant that the way was clear and Kang Hu was ready to escape. However, one of the escorts spoke to him, inquiring about the situation in the 18th building. The young man realized that they were beginning to suspect him, but he kept his cool. The conversation continued, and the guard's partner suddenly asked how long he had been serving here. Kang Hu confidently stated that he had transferred only the day before yesterday. Then came the tricky question of whether he served in the 9th block. The guy nodded, but it turned out to be a trap, because such a sector did not exist. Kang Hu realized that he had exposed himself, but he did not waste time. He had to act immediately. The first thing he did was neutralize the one who began to suspect something was wrong. The second guard, sitting behind the wheel, immediately attacked him with magic, releasing a blast of fire. However, the target disappeared. The stunned guard was already overjoyed, deciding that he had eliminated the offender. But the next moment, the young man appeared right in front of him, piercing his throat with a knife. This would have been a perfect finish to the attack, if not for one thing: he spent too much mana. At that very moment, a patrol car appeared nearby. Kang Hu took off, rushing down the slope. Suddenly, a voice was heard behind him. Someone was watching what was happening and, judging by the intonation, was impressed by the fact that the prisoner single-handedly dealt with 2 guards. He called him a low-ranking scum, but the young man immediately noticed an important detail. A red mark was burning above his head. This meant that the stranger was connected to the constellation. Moreover, Kang Hu realized that he had the ability to track mana, which was why he was able to track him down so easily. The boy could see which constellation the stranger had a contract with. And the red mark also reminded him of the opportunity that allows him to take possession of the enemy's power, which will kill him. This was his first real chance. However, rushing into open combat is a sure path to death. The stranger was clearly at least level 100, meaning he was not up to direct combat. But the young man knew what to do. He suddenly dashed towards the bushes, deliberately provoking the enemy to give chase. He, of course, grinned and without wasting any time activated his mana tracking ability. The next second he rushed after the fugitive, confident that he could catch him. Finding his target turned out to be easy, and the mana led him straight to the dense undergrowth. Without thinking, the hunter attacked. However, there was no one there. Before he knew what had happened, the sword had passed across his throat. Our guy, while killing, advised not to underestimate opponents anymore. The young man received his reward, and the concluded contract came under his control. He now had the ability to track mana and night vision, and both skills immediately reached their maximum level. But the joy did not last long. Because he had to suppress his mana while hiding from the enemy, he spent too much energy. When all the energy flowed into the stone, he felt that he could no longer move, and at that moment, blood began to flow from his mouth. The last jump that brought him to this state turned out to be the most exhausting. Now he understood that if he made one more wrong step, he would simply fall down dead. He needed shelter. Luckily, in the morning, a truck was passing by, carrying sand for cleaning the mana stones. Without thinking, he jumped straight there. Kang Hu thought during the escape he had already killed 3 guards, and in the original story, this did not happen. He needs to change the plot less. After all, his position in this world was too fragile. The boy leaned back wearily. As the truck drove, he watched the stunning view that opened up before him. In one of the buildings, there was a discussion about the absurd fugitive. The manager confidently stated that there was no need to focus on him, and that new low-ranking newcomers could always be found without any problems. Everyone had to mind their own business. But even he couldn't get the guy out of his mind who had taken them by surprise and brazenly left through the front gate. It's interesting that a rank 10 assassin was able to deal with level 45 and 55 guards, especially with a constellation. Meanwhile, Kang Hu was far from being in the best shape. Exhausted, he went into a phone booth and dialed So Yan's number. At the same time, the leader was still thinking about him, imagining how exciting it would be to hunt for this fugitive. Kang Hu ended up at So Yan's house, who immediately began to treat him. The girl couldn't believe her eyes and immediately began asking him about where he had been. Her voice trembled as she asked if he had been in a war zone. Kang Hu calmly replied that he had been kidnapped. This shocked her even more. Was he really forced to mine mana stones, since this group was known for kidnapping hunters? But despite all this, the guy trusted So Yan because she still loved him. When they parted, she was just a newbie, but now she has already reached level 150 and has made a contract with a constellation. If she had followed him then, they would most likely both have ended up in the detention center. Kang Hu thanked her for her concern, but immediately warned her not to get involved with him. Nothing good would come of it. He didn't want her to be tracked either, but the girl insisted that tracking level 105 loot wasn't that easy. However, Kang Hu asked her to simply use her powers for her own benefit. The girl, although she didn't want to let him go, still handed him some cash and a hacked phone that was almost impossible to track. Then the conversation turned to guilds. So Yan invited Kang Hu to join her team, clearly hinting at a reunion. However, the guy immediately cut off this topic. He did not want to return to the past. They said their goodbyes sweetly, and Kang Hu got into a taxi, ordering the driver to take him to Daejeon Station. The driver asked if he could turn on the radio, and Kang Hu just nodded. The news reported that the Young Wan Guild had destroyed the White Rose mercenary group, and after the Judgment Day, their base was in Johnson. The day of judgment has come. One of the drivers was driving with his girlfriend and noticed that the streets were empty on weekends. This doesn't happen. He turned to tell the girl about this, but saw only her bones. The skin seemed to evaporate, and death itself appeared before him with a scythe. At this time, on the roof of a building in central Seoul, a reporter was broadcasting breaking news. But before she could finish speaking, she was pierced by a monster's claw. A strange veil enveloped the city, and no one could understand what was happening. People with unusual abilities appeared. They began to be called hunters. At first, they fought monsters, but then they started killing people, hiding behind the name of God, and then they completely lost all motives. Just when it seemed there was no hope, Xu Huan appeared. He gathered around himself protectors and healers, creating the Chunwan Guild. Seoul became the center of safety, where everyone who wanted to survive flocked. But the guild also had its own dark secrets. The news claimed that White Rose was a terrorist organization and that it was destroyed by Xu Huan. But in fact, the entire attack was his doing. People didn't ask questions, they just believed what they were told. The driver enthusiastically told me that his son dreamed of joining Xu Huan's guild. At this moment, Kang Hu thought that if he dared to go against the leader, he would inevitably die. The young man realized that he should stay away and join a group of similar mercenaries, because that way he would have more freedom. At this moment, the taxi took the guy to his destination. At the place, he was met by a girl named Yerin. The guy decided not to tell his real name and therefore introduced himself as Yoon Sang-kyu. She knew about him and immediately offered him a job collecting information. Kang Hu refused. He needed difficult tasks and good rewards. The girl laughed when she heard this, because with his 10th level, such desires seemed ridiculous to her. But the guy was serious. He knew this world because he created it himself. This girl was against the 13 stars and he needed to win her trust. He explained that being a mercenary is not about levels but about skills. Yerin didn't accept his point of view but proposed a test. When they started, the guy had to dodge her mist tracker ability. This skill created puppets made of fog that could track a target anywhere. It was not a combat skill, but it was extremely useful. If Kang Hu doesn't dodge, there will be traces left, but if he endures, the test will be passed. The girl activated the ability, but the guy jumped so high that it caused her a real shock. Even at level 10, jumping a meter was already a difficult task, and his maneuver seemed impossible. She began to doubt that this was an ordinary hunter. Maybe it was an assassin skill, or maybe he used teleportation. But then Yoon Sang-kyu appeared behind her and put his sword to her throat. He suggested completing the test. By the way, the guy was also surprised by Yerin's speed. She moved faster than he expected. However, it is not surprising because the girl was the commander of the mercenaries. She asked if he had any combat training before, but the answer was negative. The girl immediately realized that he was lying because a level 10 hunter couldn't move like that. But in any case, he passed the test and she decided to give him the first task. The couple got into the car and Yerin asked him if he needed bulletproof glass. She had been hunted by a shooter for some time now, and she was getting pretty tired of being a target. Kang Hu didn't understand what she was talking about, And then the girl clarified that she had been getting too much attention from the jerks from Eclipse. After a short pause, she showed him the task she had ordered. It was necessary to track down the boots, a task that turned out to be useful not only for her, but also for Yoon Sang-kyu himself. The quest was located in Gyeonggi-do, in an open dungeon called Abandoned Ruins. Kim Mok-hyun, a level 50 mage, stole Vastard's boots, a tier 3 rare item. Kang-hoo asked Ye-rin if it was important to keep the mage alive, but Ye-rin shrugged and replied that because of him, many people had died, so even the Hunter National Security Agency would be satisfied with his elimination. The boy was filled with enthusiasm and was ready to begin the task. The girl warned that Kim Mok-hyun was most likely hiding in the depths of the dungeon. The place itself was huge, but for Kang-hoo, it was the perfect field of action, because he knew this location very well, because in the original version of the story, he himself used it as a hideout. There were mid-level bosses in the area, which meant there was plenty of room for leveling up. Once he got there, he cut his hand so that the blood would attract the local monsters, the mad rabbits. Sensing the scent, they rushed at him, but the guy easily dealt with them using teleport and a jump. All that remained was to find the target and carry out the order. Before the start of the quest, Ye-rin also asked him what he wanted as a reward. The answer was simple: a license to clear dungeons with strong bosses. Suddenly, a mid-level boss named Ventus appeared in front of the young man. Kang-hoo was only glad to meet him. The boss's icon lit up, indicating the possibility of robbing him, but Ventus himself was not going to retreat. The fight began. Ventus used clones to try and confuse his opponent, but Kang-hoo easily dodged them with teleportation. Even though the boss was technically considered average, his fighting style was rough. At the right moment, Kang-hoo appeared behind his opponent, activated his weapon, and thrust his sword straight into his body. The monster fell, leaving behind loot. However, at that moment, hidden spectators were watching the guy and were closely following what was happening. Jo Yeon-jae, a rank 3 special hunter, was impressed by how skillfully Kang-hoo dealt with Ventus. A girl from his group remembered that she had recently seen this guy in a store. He was buying supplies, obviously preparing for a serious hunt. They were surprised this mercenary looked like an experienced killer. The leader of the group wondered if this newcomer really posed a threat, but the girl encouraged him, assuring him that he was no match for their boss. She offered to lure Kang-hoo directly to them, but Jo Yeon-jae refused. In his opinion, it would have been easier to wait until he got tired and then just rob him. The girl agreed and the plan was logical. Meanwhile, Kang-hoo had already reached level 16. He knew the next basic skill would unlock at level 20 and was ready to put all his points into stamina. As long as he could control his innate mana sensitivity, other parameters didn't matter. In his hands, he held Silasium, a rare plant with an analgesic and sedative effect, capable of suppressing increased sensitivity to mana. It was rare to find in normal dungeons, and its mass production was almost impossible. However, Kang-hoo knew that there was a person in the country who could cultivate it. The problem was that he was right in the middle of the action, in an area once called the demilitarized zone. Getting there wasn't easy. The guy understood that he needed to prepare urgently. If his mana sensitivity gets out of control in battle, he will simply die. However, before he could move forward, he needed a lot of money. At the same time, Ye-rin was sitting in the car and talking to someone on the phone. Just a year ago, the connection quality was much better, but now it was getting worse every day. They told her that someone was trying to interfere, so they couldn't do anything about it, especially the girl under Eclipse or Black Lion. And then most likely things would only get worse, and the girl did not argue. Yeah, she might be going through a tough time right now after getting involved with the Eclipse guys. At that moment, she noticed that a car was following her. Her heart sank, but she quickly pulled herself together, because this was already routine in her life, and she had long been accustomed to looking over her shoulder. As she quickened her pace, they continued to talk to her about finding a hunter who could be recommended. One person was short-staffed, and it would be nice to suggest someone worthy. The girl, maneuvering between garbage containers, knocked them over, blocking the path of her pursuers. She sped up and, without losing her breath, replied that she didn't know who would suit Shi Huan's taste. However, he unexpectedly admitted that he had changed his priorities and now wanted to raise someone from scratch. Then the girl thought about it and suggested one candidate, but warned that he needed a little more time. Shi Huan said with a slight smile that Ye-rin was not wrong. He also expressed regret for those employees who died in accidents, but she brushed it off. There is no need to dwell on the past because the main thing is to watch a promising guy. Before the conversation ended, the girl asked if he had anything useful for her. In response, Shi Huan promised to send insider information about criminal organizations later. This suited her and she thanked him. He also said that he was always happy to help because the guild needed talents. When the conversation ended, the girl was left alone with her thoughts. Why does she have such high expectations for a man who just received his first order? Of course, she was thinking about Yun Sang-kyu, aka Kang Hu. At this time, the guy himself was already fighting with another mid-level boss, Ibria. The creature was wildly displeased that he had driven the knife into her hand, and she reached out to grab it. But Kang Hu used the illusion skill he had recently acquired to avoid being captured. The enraged boss picked up a huge boulder and threw it at him, but missed again. It was just another hoax. The guy was already behind the monster and drove the blade straight into the target. Soon, a message appeared that he had defeated a mid-level boss and his level had increased. All stats went to endurance, and the new steal skill reached the maximum level, allowing him to steal items and use them in battle, and he felt like he could fight much more effectively now. But he didn't know that he was being closely watched. 3 strangers were discussing his boys. One of them noted with admiration that this man dealt with Ibria without the help of a tank. Selleck suggested throwing him down to earth, but Jo Yeon-jae exploded in anger. He said that we need to wait for the right moment when it weakens. Meanwhile, in another place, the same Kim Mok-hyun was carefully studying the document. The Black Lion approved of his accession. He was pleased, even though he knew that Yerin was most likely in a panic right now, looking for him. He himself, of course, dreamed of getting into Eclipse, but the Black Lion was also an excellent option. Now he could finally reach Daejeon. At this time, Kang Hu was near the construction site, and Mok-hyun immediately noticed him. He narrowed his eyes and thought that in front of him was another easy prey. The boy summoned the dark hounds by hitting the wall. The dogs rushed towards Kang Hu, but he reacted instantly, taking out a piece of meat. The dogs immediately turned to food, drooling. The man was dumbfounded because were his dogs really that stupid? While they were happily chewing on the treat, Kang Hu quickly summoned a dagger and dealt with them. He coldly tells his opponent that if he values his life, then he should return what was stolen. If it's the same guy that Yerin sent, then he might try to take it if he can. The young man instantly turned around and ran. But this donkey had prepared traps and watched with interest how the newcomer would get around them. However, the boy used the mana tracking skill and easily noticed every trap. Jumping over them deftly, he angered his opponent again. Mok-hyun exclaimed in annoyance. "What's wrong with this idiot?" The donkey decided to show his strength because his constellation gave him the ability to weaken the enemy's feelings. But Kang Hu didn't lose his head, used teleportation, and suddenly appeared right in front of him. The guy figured that Mok-hyun was around level 50, which meant his weak points could be calculated. The donkey, confident of victory, used the blinding skill. Kang Hu was not quite prepared for this, but he quickly adapted. He timed it right and used the kidnapping skill. Thus, he struck a blow to the side. The enemy wasn't dead yet, but he was on the edge and couldn't believe that this guy had outplayed him. By the way, Kang Hu noticed that the opponent used some kind of object because his attacks were very fast. And when Mok-hyun was about to catch up, he saw a bunch of copies. Here behind him was the real Kang Hu, and he delivered the final blow. The young man looked down at him, enjoying his triumph. And then a message appeared. The Master of Maneuvers constellation highly rated the strategy, plus 0.1% to experience. Kang Hu froze. Could this really be support? Usually the constellations watch over the hunters, but rarely interfere. Another message from the Dimension Thief appeared in front of him. He reported that what was shown to him was a mere drop in the ocean, and perhaps even a humiliation. However, the guy didn't bother and said that the Dimension Thief chose him for a reason. In response, the Dimension called him crazy and ordered him to focus on Kim Mok-hyun. He in turn tried to run away but was grabbed by the leg. Then the man started shouting that catching someone like him would not give anything and there was no point at all. But Kang Hu dreamed that catching bastards like this donkey could change the lives of other people. If it were possible, he would have been doing it a long time ago. He eventually finished off Kim Mok-hyun for good, and a message appeared in front of him. The contract is concluded, and the Chaos Fighter is kidnapped. The Chaos Fighter is enslaved by the Dimension Thief. The contract cannot be removed until the expiration date. He now inherits all the abilities of a Chaos Fighter, including Chaos Blindness and Lightness. Then the winner got ready to take the item he came for. Of course, undressing men is not his hobby, but he still took a lot of items. Kim Mok-hyun's glove would ideally be connected to the throwing dagger using a thread. And for the breastplate, it is better to change the effect on health. Next, he put on a ring that increased stamina, and it turned out to be one of the most useful items. Next was the Evil God's Amulet, which consumed 1 mana per second during awakening, but reduced the casting time of skills, which proved to be very useful for Kang Hu. Having taken everything he needed, the young man decided to sell the 9th level items, as he urgently needed money. Meanwhile, his level had already reached 19, but during the journey he planned to increase it to 20. And finally, the Skill Eater Killer is just around the corner. As he walked down the street, Kang Hu noticed that there were no monsters around, and he found this strange. Meanwhile, the trio was still following him. They decided to start by wearing out Kang Hu by sending mad rabbits at him. They immediately rushed towards Kang Hu, smelling the scent of his blood. While he was dealing with the rabbits, his level finally reached 20, and he obtained the main skill of the assassin class, Rapid Strike. However, thanks to his constellation, the skill was improved and became Bleeding Strike. True Strike increases bleeding when hitting a target again. The guy managed to finish off the rabbits so easily that it surprised the blonde. But in turn, the boss was sure that their target had let down his guard, which was only to their advantage. And Zhou Yanjie quickly crept up and swung at his opponent. At this moment, Kang Hu used a jump and dodged the attack. He thought that they wanted to rob him and was even a little confused. The jock was of course angry about his miss, so he went on an open attack. On the other hand, the guy dodged the blows perfectly. Our Kang Hu received a notification that he needed to hit 10 times to weaken his regeneration ability. In general, they started an active battle and used their tricks. At that moment, Kang Hu used the skill Blindness, Light Chaos, and Bleeding Strike in combination. But there was no point. Zhou Yanjie didn't seem to care about all the blows, and it even started to irritate the main character. The boss of the Trinity was still full of enthusiasm when he suddenly realized that his strength was leaving him. At this moment, Kang Hu used the kidnapping and delivered the final blow to death. The jock team froze and ran away with their tails between their legs. A message has appeared stating that a Chaos Fighter has been enslaved by a Dimension Reaver and cannot be freed until the contract expires. On top of that, Kang Hu inherited all the abilities of a Chaos Fighter, which was already the second time that day. The Dimension Robber, watching him, only smirked and called him crazy. The opponent left behind a bracelet with attack resistance, shoes that increase movement speed, and gloves that increase endurance. Returning to Daejeon, he met with Yerin, who did not expect him to pass the test so easily. She said that in fact this request was a test, and almost half of the participants fail at the first stage. Thanks to his cunning and calculation, Kang Hu's success rate was higher than usual. As a reward, he was given access to the link-level boss dungeon, Wuthering Heights, which was located near Gapyong Station, and contained 4 mid-level bosses and 1 main boss. She asked him if he was happy with the reward and then offered him another task, hunting a criminal named Hyo Jung Tai. He was accused of stealing state property and causing damage. The reward was 300 million won and 1 month of access to level 100 dungeons. But the agency had no leads other than the fact that he was last seen near Yangpyeong Station. The girl doubted whether Kang Hu could handle it, but he just chuckled and said that he had his own ways. After earning 250 million won by selling unwanted items, he decided it was time to unwind a bit. He called someone and said that he wanted to purchase 10 batches of Salakium and asked them to deliver them to Yongsan Station. The order was accepted, but he still had some time before the start of the new dungeon, and he decided to go to the club, have a drink, and gather useful information. This was not an ordinary club. Bets were made on life and death. Kang Hu sat down at the bar and ordered a glass of Salakium. The barmaid Benny was surprised and noted that rarely did anyone order such a drink. Kang Hu just chuckled, saying that he had a special taste. In fact, it was important for him to find out the information, because in such places the bartenders always know everything, even if not all the information was true. Suddenly he noticed Cha So-hee, the subordinate of Eclipse CEO Kang Dong-hyun. Is she here to spy on him? While he was thinking, Benny came up to him again and said that it was a pity that they would most likely not see each other again. This surprised Kang Hu, and he asked why, and the girl couldn't help but tell him that she had heard rumors that Eclipse wanted to take over the club and take all the hunters to send them to the mines. This was one of the typical methods of human trafficking, and then it became clear why Cha So-hee appeared here. Before Kang Hu could properly relax, Eclipse's fighters burst into the club. They declared that the place was now theirs, and that everyone should clear out. However, one of them noticed Kang Hu and aggressively asked why he was looking at him like that, and was he really looking for trouble. The madman charged at him with an axe, but Kang Hu used a teleport, causing the 2 Eclipse hunters to kill each other. Cha So-hee, seeing this, suddenly rushed towards him with a knife. However, she did not attack Kang Hu. Instead, she began to kill her own. Turning to him, the girl said that the guy looked familiar and asked what guild he was from. The guy sarcastically replied that they were the kind where they didn't like having their hands tied. It was clear that the stranger interested the girl, and she suddenly suggested that the guy talk about business, but only after they got out of here. The other participants in the events clearly did not understand why the investigator was behaving this way. They were completely at a loss, not knowing whether to change their strategy or continue to act according to plan. The girl, without wasting any time, whispered the command to attack. The hunters immediately rushed into battle, surrounding her and the guy. Kang Hu immediately realized that this was a plan, and most likely his skills and abilities were just being tested now. He had no intention of retreating, so without hesitation he threw the knife and it went straight into the head of one of his opponents. This was the beginning of chaos, and the attackers rushed at the guy, but he deftly stopped all attacks, leaving the enemies without a single chance. The girl standing next to him was obviously just pretending to be helping, but she couldn't hide her delight and surprise. Without waiting for the development of events, Kang Hu headed towards the emergency exit, and the girl secretly indicated to follow them. While they were moving, the girl suddenly asked, "Isn't he just a killer? Can he also use magic?" But the guy didn't care what she thought. Let him think what he wanted. He had no intention of revealing his cards, and his gloves matched the dagger perfectly, making every movement deadly. As soon as he got outside, a new squad was already waiting for him. And then suddenly a notification went out from inside the club. Black Lion insiders had been planted here to create chaos, and now Eclipse was ready for a quick takeover. This was done to send people to the camp. One of the hunters, without wasting any time, swung a sledgehammer at Kang Hu. But the guy dodged, easily stepped aside, and struck back. At that moment, a message appeared in front of him. That the constellation Apostle of Justice is impressed by your actions to punish hypocrisy and evil. Holy power is used. A positive effect and an increase in experience +0. One has been received. Kang Hu even found this amusing. Is there really something like justice in this world? One of the opponents threw an axe at him but missed, and the weapon only stuck into the wall. The guy immediately took advantage of the situation, pushed off the handle of the axe, deftly jumped over the enemies, and without a drop of regret, sent them to their forefathers with precise, fatal blows. Cha So-hee had been watching the fight the whole time, and realized that she had clearly made the right choice with this guy. When they found themselves on neutral territory, the girl offered him cooperation without any tied hands. She promised that the payment would be generous, and holding out her business card, made it clear that she was counting on long-term cooperation. Kang Hu, accepting the card, only chuckled and asked to contact him if they had any urgent matters. After that, he just turned around and left. As soon as he was out of sight, the girl received a call. She listened and calmly replied that the work in this place was finished. And then she received a new order to find a guy whose name was Shin Kang Hu. As soon as Kang Hu exited the subway, he realized that the order Cha So-hee was waiting for had never been delivered. It seemed like it was best for him to stay away from Daejin for a while, and he was also annoyed that Eclipse's influence was continuing to grow. Instead of taking the risk of taking the train towards Gapyeong, he decided to go via Yongsan Station. Meanwhile, his magical plants had already been delivered, and he knew that this station was a great place to get them since it was in the original. As Kang Hu was about to leave, he noticed a guy nervously chatting on the phone discussing a part-time job. However, upon seeing Kang Hu, this guy immediately went berserk, screamed, and quickly ran away. The place that the Guild of Purification swore to protect has become a monopoly on the dungeons. The only plus was that it was one of the few areas where the Public Security Agency operated at least at some level. But despite this, the market remained huge and overflowing with goods, and in size it was 1.5 times larger than any district, and the prices here were simply murderous. While choosing his weapon, Kang Hu noticed a pop-up notification that the sword he was looking at was level 5 and had a PS power of +50. He was already impatient to get rid of the old training ball, and to try out this blade, he took a stone, activated the power, and crushed it with ease. Now that was power. Unlike other hunters, he didn't have to worry about mana consumption. The main thing for him was controlling his physical strength, and so the choice of a sword was obvious. On the street, he noticed a young family with a child. They chatted about how the Purification Guild was taking care of the city and how they were going to have a delicious dinner that evening. But Kang Hu knew very well that it was all a lie. At that moment, he heard screams and, turning around, saw a couple of robbers kidnap the boy right from the arms of his parents. The child was scared, and one of the bandits hinted that he would have to pay for his return. The people around were shocked, but no one dared to intervene. Kang Hu was also waiting to see if the Public Security Agency would show up, but they were in no hurry. He decided that since no one was taking action, he would have to solve the problem himself. However, Chae Gwang-hyun from the Purification Guild suddenly appeared. He used his unique fencing and spatial orientation skills. Kang Hu didn't expect to meet such colleagues here, especially him, because he definitely wouldn't be noticed in such a situation. Gwang-hyun quickly handed over his bank card to the robbers and said that they could spend whatever they wanted on it, but they had to let the child go. Realizing that the money was already in their hands, the bandits released the boy and tried to escape. However, Hyun didn't let them leave. He activated his spatial ability and created a black dome, trapping the robbers inside. One of them was killed on the spot, and the second one's mask accidentally fell off. Seeing his face, Kang Hu recognized this guy because he had seen him before at the station. The surviving bandit, in a panic, began to babble about some kind of agreement and insisted that they were simply playing by the rules. But Guang Hyun pretended not to understand anything and ended up finishing him off. When the dome disappeared, he announced to everyone that the situation was under control. Kang Hu just watched from the side. It was obvious that the Purification Guild was using independent hunters to gain the trust of the people. But this was all part of their plan for complete monopolization. At that moment, Cha So-hee was given documents about the person she was tasked to find. When she looked at the photo, she realized that this face was all too familiar to her. In any case, the next point of the main character was a dungeon. He decided it was time and told the guards that he was ready to go in. The guards, noticing that his level was only 20, began to doubt. The dungeon was clearly more difficult than he thought, and they warned him that he would have a hard time at those levels. But Kang Hu was confident and said that he would level up if necessary. His goal was at least 50th because he wanted to improve Che Guang Hyun's skills. As soon as he entered, a sandstorm started, and he was immediately thrown off course. If it weren't for his ability to track mana, he would have definitely gotten lost. Suddenly, right in front of him, a crack appeared, and he thought that this was the end of the road. But then his eyes met the red eyes of huge lizards which seemed to be dangerous. They attacked, but Kang Hu knew that if he could deal with them, he could achieve his goal even faster. The guy decided that he had to act. The lizards attacked. With the help of his gloves, the young man was able to strike all the lizards at once and noticed that there were not many left alive. There was only one small thing left to do. At this time, Cha So-hee, also a participant in this story, began to think about his new target, Kang Hu. Her assistant said that the guy's level is too low, but she saw him herself a couple of days ago, and his level is at least 100. Using cunning and a jump, the boy deceived the lizards and they all fell into the cliff. At this time, the same investigator went to the place where the guy was mining mana stones. She was surprised that the guy was able to so skillfully draw a picture with blood to summon the constellation. When the master called her and asked if she had finished the investigation, the girl only answered that the guy was not an ordinary guy. Apparently, he interested her so much that she even killed her assistant when he downplayed the boy's strength. The lizards dropped mana stones on the boy, reminding him of his past fate. Soon a figure surrounded by flames appeared behind Kang Hu. This was the first skill he was to gain, but the guy was clearly not alone in this area. In any case, the young man quickly dealt with the monster. With the new fire modifier ability, the weapon could become fiery, giving it a huge advantage. Meanwhile, the boy who was watching the character was surprised by his speed and strength. And he also seemed very smart because he was able to attract him and then deceive him into the oasis. It turns out that this mysterious stranger was sent by Yerin. Despite the high level of testing, she was worried about his level. She asked to help Kang Hu if the situation becomes critical. One after another, the youngster dealt with the bosses, a body defender, a fullback, and a forward defender, all of whom were of average quality. Kang Hu assumed that he would receive an increased reward for defeating the three, since the monsters were clearly coordinating their attacks. At that moment, he remembered Yerin's words when he promised to contact her after the fight with Heo Jung-tai. The girl offered him a job with good clients and asked if he wanted to try conquering the dungeon again. However, the guy smiled slyly because he was not going to join anyone, because he expected to take everything himself. Moving in short-range jumps, Kang Hu broke through the monster's defenses. Maneuver after maneuver, he closed the distance to deliver the decisive blow. The monsters only watched his movements, unable to react. When the time came, he used space takeover and moved to the extreme distance, allowing him to isolate one of the defenders. At that very moment, he rushed towards him, but the monster, sensing a threat, raised his shield. However, Kang Hu instantly bypassed the defense and targeted the remaining monsters, and the teleportation once again allowed him to confuse the opponents. Finding a weak spot in their dome of defense, he charged into the enemies, destroying them in the blink of an eye. The mid-level boss had fallen, but his comrades had no intention of retreating. One of them, filled with rage, rushed at the guy. Kang Hu used teleportation and appeared behind the monster, but the enemy expected this and launched a spinning attack. However, the hunter anticipated this move and, having dodged, found himself in the monster's blind spot. At that moment, he thrust the weapon straight into the body of the last defender. Another mid-level boss was defeated, and the system notified him of a new level. Now he reached 29. In addition, he received new skills: front, flank, and rear defense. By combining them, he created the skill Protective Barrier, which forms a powerful shield that disappears after the duration ends. Kang Hu noted with satisfaction that this skill would prove to be very useful in the future. Meanwhile, the archer who was watching the battle was amazed. He was already starting to think that this guy really didn't need any team. However, it is too early to draw conclusions because everything will be decided in the battle with the main boss, who was already waiting for Kang Hu ahead. The guy came face to face with the main target of his mission. The boss activated the skill Dark Blue Fireworks with his first move. But Kang Hu easily dodged it using short-range jumps. The monster couldn't allow the human to close the distance so easily, so it released a beam of dark magic, one of its defensive skills. The boss's next move was to use wind arrows. This monster clearly didn't skimp on magic. One of the arrows flew so close that it cut a piece of cloth on Kang Hu's shoulder. The guy realized that he would have to take a risk and take some damage to get closer. He decided to use the bleeding effect, but he knew that the boss had a deadly skill, Blood Flower, which could instantly kill the hunter. Something had to be thought up urgently. A hidden observer watched the fight and was perplexed because the fighters still had not inflicted serious wounds on each other. Do they really take that long to find weak points? Meanwhile, Kang Hu had finally pushed him to the brink, and it was time to show his calling card. In the blink of an eye, the entire battlefield was filled with fireworks infused with magic. The mercenary instantly got close to the monster. Now this freak definitely won't be able to catch him. Kang Hu used abduction, but the boss did not give up. He continued to cast spells, and a powerful explosion occurred at the place where they collided. The magician fired non-stop as if trying to burn the hunter to the ground. Kang Hu used teleportation at the last moment and ended up behind the boss. However, the monster only grinned because he was sure that in this zone his defense was impenetrable. But the barrier he relied on took the full brunt of the dark energy. But immediately after that, the hunter's sword flared up with fire magic. In one lunge, he pierced the boss's body, engulfing him in flames. Kang Hu watched as the monster burned to ashes, leaving only charred pieces of flesh behind. The fire attribute proved to be incredibly useful, and the observer was stunned that Kang Hu was able to defeat Alicia with only his level. After the victory, the boy received a new skill, Blood Flower, and his main goal was achieved. At that very moment, the very observer he had sensed long ago disappeared from sight. His level increased to 32 and the basic assassin class skill acceleration was unlocked. He gradually grew stronger as he continued to absorb the rare plant. The War Demon constellation approved of Kang Hu's attack strategy and even donated a small amount of holy power, which gave the guy a nice bonus to the experience gained, plus 0.3%. This unexpected support surprised him because he didn't think that he would be encouraged like that. At that moment, the Dimension Robber turned to him, sarcastically saying that the guy had neither shame nor conscience. Of course, there were no goodies left after the boss, but still, among the dropped items, there was something valuable. Kang Hu noted that the find could be useful to him. Meanwhile, Cha So-hee informed his master that he had found Kang Hu and that he had locked himself in the house. The team was prepared to burn the door to the ground to find any evidence. At the same time, someone sitting in the house across the street was typing a message to the client that Eclipse had tracked the house and were now rummaging through it for evidence. The boss admitted that he even envies Kang Hu because nothing can stop him. He is cautious, calculating, and certainly has strong intuition. Even Cha So-hee himself didn't have this. Hamso-lei wrote to the guy that they were looking for him. He understood that if they were looking for him, they would soon find Lee Yeren too. And after the guy refused, she had no reason to cover for him. In any case, the guy was going to find a partner to complete the task of capturing Ho Jung-tai. A guy with bright red hair stood in front of a multi-story building, peering intently into the windows. This was the last house he was going to search for Ho Jung-tai. There was a man standing next to him who tried to calm him down, saying that he understood his worries because he was talking about a fellow countryman. But there was no need to get so upset because this area was not even under their jurisdiction. The door was opened by a guy who definitely didn't look like his target, but the man still asked if Ho Jung-tai lived there. He hesitated, not understanding who was being talked about, and replied that he lived alone. At that moment, the hunter's gaze caught on the pistol casually lying near the sink. He asked if this guy was a professional hunter by any chance. The unknown man hesitated, but replied that the weapon was simply a precaution. The red-haired man nodded, getting ready to leave. But suddenly the owner of the apartment abruptly grabbed the gun and tried to shoot. However, the hunter reacted instantly, and his sword whistled through the doorway with lightning speed, cutting off a couple of his opponent's fingers and cutting the pistol in half. The man realized that he had finally found the trail. He chuckled and offered advice about taking the weapon off safety in advance. The guy panicked and tried to escape, but received a powerful blow to the back from a boot. Pressing himself to the floor, he stuttered as he admitted that he had only met Ho Jung-tai once. He ordered him to kill everyone who starts searching, but he himself is hiding alone, and perhaps he has patrons. As he left the house, the hunter wondered if the investigation in Yangpyeong had reached a dead end. Suddenly, he noticed the cops approaching. I had to disappear immediately. However, he was noticed. And then suddenly Kang-hoo emerged from the crowd. He calmly asked the cops where they were from and what he had to ask of them. The police replied that they had a mission, but Kang-hoo just kept pointing to the opposite side of the street and talking nonsense. While the cops were distracted, the red-haired man deftly disappeared. Apparently, this was the guy's plan. Later, the hunter returned to the shelter, leafing through old photographs. The pictures show a man with a friend, and memories come flooding back. He remembered how they talked about guilds, about work. The comrade assured me that everything was settled, and that he himself would be here in Seoul. He was pulled out of his thoughts by the same guy who helped him escape. The hunter was puzzled as to how he was found. The guy calmly stated the guy's name was Yoo Do-hoon, his level was 62, and that he worked for the capital's police department. The red-haired man was clearly unhappy and angry. Was he digging under him, or was he also from the police? The guy evasively replied that he did not intend to disclose the information, but he knew why he was looking for Ho Jung-tae and offered to cooperate. At the same time, Ye-rin was interviewing a young man. They had a deal and it didn't go through, but the girl promised to recommend him to Chang Shu-hwan. Suddenly, Cha So-hee burst into the room. She was glad that she finally found them and handed over the documents and asked Ye-rin if she knew Kang-hoo. Ye-rin raised her eyebrows in surprise. At this time, Kang-hoo offered Yoo Do-hoon a deal. He understood that their common goal was Ho Jung-tae. It was obvious that the man wasn't doing very well as a policeman and was trying to get information. It's clear that their guy has a patron, and he's so cool that even the public security agency has taken notice of him. It was as if moments from memories of Ho Jung-tae were coming together in my head like puzzles. But Yoo Do-hoon decided to show off and said that he didn't believe in it. But Kang-hoo didn't care. He arranged to meet at the square at 6 p.m. In return, he promised to keep his promise. Meanwhile, Cha So-hee was beating the information out of Ye-rin, who was lying about it. By the way, it turned out that the guy's name is Kang-hoo, not Yoon Sang-kyu. In any case, the investigator did not believe that the girl did not know him and shook out the truth. Ye-rin still said that she saw him, but things didn't work out. And after that, she ordered So-hee to leave so that she wouldn't get into trouble. She left. Ye-rin saw an opportunity in the investigator who could foster a stronger relationship with Shin Kang-hoo. At this moment, Ho Jung-tae received messages that he was being searched for. It was even funny because he was right under their noses. Suddenly, Kang-hoo came out from the gateway and shouted the name of Ho Jung-tae. By the way, the target had a harmful constellation, and hunters who serve neutral or good constellations improve their combat skills. At this moment, Kang-hoo was blinded. This surprised the main character because it was surprising to use blinding so unnoticed and have such a strong resistance to skills. Ho Jung-tae decided to immediately kill the unexpected guest by pointing a bunch of knives at him. But Cha So-hee at this time directed fire at the guy who claimed that he had no idea who Shin Kang-hoo was. With a snap of a finger, everything turned into fire. She was desperate to find the boy who was always running away. But let's get back to the battle with Jung-tae. Pointing the knives at Kang-hoo, he was sure he would kill him. At that moment, the enemy dodged using the barrier. He continued to dodge all attacks. And then Jung-tae was about to approach. But the main character used abduction and bleeding strike. After this, the frightened Jung-tae was about to leave. But Kang-hoo, having directed a bloody flower, neutralized his opponent. Writhing in pain, the guy began to threaten with his status and the people who stand behind him. But the winner did not want to listen to this and allowed the loser to sleep. Meanwhile, Yoo Do-hoon was thinking about his conversation with Kang-hoo as he left the hideout. He said he almost collided with colleagues from the public security agency. Yoo Do-hoon asked what he meant, and Kang-hoo heard that some issues were handled through the app and his friend's account was still active. If public safety wants to remove it, then they want to get rid of its owner too. However, Ho Jung-tae's patrons clearly did not allow them to do so. Apparently, someone is trying to cover up the matter, and the Seoul and Yangpyeong police are under pressure. It was more profitable for them to hide the truth than to sort it out. True, someone managed to hack the account, obtain information, and even identify the villa associated with this case. Sang-kyu was stunned that Kang-hoo knew such details. As a sign that the boy had kept his promise, he asked Yoo Do-hoon to help him. After much thought, he agreed. And if everything Kang-hoo said was true, then the Purification Guild and the Public Security Agency were indeed involved in dark deeds. When he arrived at the place, Kang-hoo was already waiting for him. He calmly waited for the latecomer with his chest. The man asked where Ho Jung-tae was and was assured that there was nothing to worry about. He was soon shown beaten, exhausted, and bleeding. Yoo Do-hong-kyu immediately understood why he couldn't track him before, because the boy had the ability to hide. Kang-hoo specifically chose a moment when there were a lot of people around so that if Yoo Do-hoon wanted to, he could immediately find out who was behind him. Now he had a choice: either take advantage of the situation and find out who was behind Yoo Do-hoon, or just get even with him. All that was left was to wait for the decision, and in a moment it became clear what choice Yoo Do-hoon had made. After a while, a security guard approached Kang-hoo and confirmed that they had contacted him about Heo Jung-tae. The guy nodded and handed them the prisoner. The policeman looked incredibly pleased and thanked him for his cooperation, since this criminal had been hunted for a long time. As a token of his gratitude, he asked Kang-hoo to enter his hunter registration number to receive the official reward. The guy didn't refuse, and 300 million won was deposited into his account, and he also received the right to rent the dungeons. After some time, the guys met again, and Kang-hoo was surprised that Yoo Do-hoon did not take revenge. He just shrugged his shoulders and believed that in his place his friend would have done the same. They both dreamed of a world where people could trust each other. He didn't want the Purification Guild and the Public Security Agency to turn everything into chaos, and now he wanted to believe that the mistakes could be corrected. If Kang-hoo's words turn out to be true, then neither the Purification nor the agency will be able to simply escape responsibility. Kang-hoo was glad to himself that everything was going exactly the same as in the original story. In the original story, Yoo Do-hoon led a rebellion against the Public Security Agency and became an enemy of the Purification Guild. Now he was walking the same path. However, this time the guy left no trace behind him, and it was all over with Heo Jung-tae. Yoo Do-hoon admitted that he was shocked because he didn't believe that Kang-hoo did it just for the reward. However, he firmly replied that he was not involved in charity, and the only reward he was really interested in was to rid Chae Kwang-hyun of his arms and legs. Meanwhile, Kwang-hyun learned that Kang-hoo and Sang-kyu had captured Heo Jung-tae. The guard who took the prisoner away said he was taken to hospital because his condition was critical. However, the boss didn't care about this. He was only interested in who exactly caught him. When they wanted to give him the hunter's registration number, the guard suddenly froze and screamed. Kwang-hyun immediately asked what was the matter. The security guard had a hard time finding words, and it turned out that the information had disappeared. And what's more, the data had been deleted from all public security management systems. There was an error in the database, as if this hunter was dead. Kwang-hyun flared up with rage and hit the table with all his might, smashing it into pieces. He couldn't believe what was happening and what all these people had been doing all this time. The guard tried to explain that he had personally gone to Yangpyeong, but there was nothing suspicious there. It was at this moment that Chang Shu-hwan appeared in front of them. His face lit up with a friendly smile, and his eyes showed his usual power. He looked at everyone gathered and asked the reason for such a shout. The conversation between Yoo Do-hoon and Kang-hoo continued. Among other things, Kang-hoo was able to take some items from Heo Jung-tae. During the conversation, Yoo Do-hoon told our guy that he looked like the main character of a story. But unfortunately, this role went to someone else. However, it was now that he felt truly sinister, as if he was overshadowing Jang Shi-hwan, who had been the shadow leader until now. Anyway, Yoo Do-hoon said that he would return to Seoul and left. Kang-hoo couldn't shake the thought that he had been obsessed with the image of the villain before, and now the story he had once conceived was beginning to come true. Meanwhile, Jang Shu-hwan, remaining unperturbed, intervened in the situation and ordered Kwang-hyun to calm down. He noticed that he seemed to be in a terrible mood, but this was no reason to panic. Kwang-hyun reported that the tool that he used for Heo Jung-tae was broken, and someone intentionally destroyed it, and it was a provocation. However, Jang Shu-hwan stopped him before he could go completely berserk. He reminded Kwang-hyun that he shouldn't lose his dignity, and in the end, what difference did it make who did it? Anyone who stands in their way will be turned to ashes. Meanwhile, Kang-hoo was heading towards Yangsu Station near Mount Buyan. This is where, according to the plot, Jang Shu-hwan was supposed to appear. It was a hidden dungeon, but now he found it first. Summoning his weapon, Kang-hoo noticed the enemy approaching. The middle boss Shadow appeared in front of him. This monster was not an easy one. Especially dangerous were his sudden attacks from behind. As soon as Kang-hoo entered the dungeon, Shadow immediately activated the skill, creating 3 copies. He was in no hurry to attack, watching the enemy's movements and waiting for the right moment. As soon as the Dark Trinity rushed to attack, it was time to act. A sharp throw and 3 opponents were struck. One disappeared, but the remaining 2 continued to attack, so summoning his weapons, Kang-hoo ignored the clones and rushed towards the original. However, just as he was about to strike, the boss used his swap ability and swapped places with one of the copies. The worst situation because the Shadow attacked from behind. But Kang-hoo had predicted this moment in advance, and the monster missed, and the hunter himself was already in the air at that moment. From a height, he threw a dagger straight into the monster's skull, and the unexpected attack hit its target, and the shadow disappeared. The illusion tactic worked perfectly, and the boss was destroyed. A system message appeared in front of Kang Hu that he had stolen the ability of shadow possession, and now the guy could create up to 5 shadows, instantly move to them, and use them for hidden attacks. And the skill itself did not require casting time, and disappeared only if it went beyond the radius or was hit. Now he has a completely new fighting style and can write his own story. Having reached level 33, Kang Hu realized that his first step in this story was complete. Meanwhile, Kwang Hyun told his interlocutor not to be too optimistic, because there is no such thing as an ideal world, to which Chang Shuhuan only replied with a smile that this world revolves around him, and the choice of justice always remains his. At the same time, an ominous cloud of dark magic began to thicken near Kang Hu. The main boss of the dungeon finally revealed himself, but his name remained hidden. The mercenary was ready for battle because in the original novel, the imposter who was called the savior of the world fought with this creature. Now he had to fight his own shadow, the main boss of the dungeon. Kang Hu was the first to attack, striking, but his double knew his every move and easily dodged. Then he instantly changed the trajectory of the attack and tried to break through the monster's defense, but again to no avail because the boss blocked the blow. A face-to-face battle was inevitable. Using illusions was pointless because they could both track each other through mana. And since both knew how to win, even teleportation did not guarantee evasion of attacks. There was only one thing left to do: fight at close range. When the boss parried another attack, Kang Hu instantly retreated using teleportation. He then immediately tried to get him with a bleeding blow, but the enemy erected a barrier and remained unharmed. However, instead of being disappointed, Kang Hu felt a surge of excitement. Using Shadow Step, he created several copies of himself and surrounded the boss. He tensed up, trying to determine which of them was the real one, and he made the right choice. But Kang Hu used the exchange ability and avoided the blow, appearing in another place. He then enveloped his dagger in flames, increasing the bleeding strike, and this time the attack was so powerful that it broke through the boss's defense. The monster was unpleasantly surprised, but immediately launched a series of blows at Kang Hu. The boss realized his mistake, that there was only a copy in front of him. At this moment, the real Kang Hu jumped from above and delivered a precise blow. The enemy tried to put up the barrier again, but the man's attack was too strong. The protective dome cracked, and then Kang Hu sharply dodged, anticipating the counterattack. The double attacked again, but again hit the copy. At that moment, Kang Hu himself was already behind him. The boss threw his weapon in panic, but again hit the wrong person. In desperation, he reactivated the barrier, hoping to buy himself some time. Kang Hu broke through the defense, breaking it again and again. The boss was running out of mana, and unlike the real one, he couldn't restore it. The final blow and bleeding attack pierced him through and through. The monster realized that he had lost and decided to run away, but Kang Hu was ready. His deadly combo of a bleeding strike, ending with a bloody flower, left the enemy with no chance. The boss fell, turning to dust. The system notified him about the level increase and the possibility of upgrading skills. This is exactly why he went to this hidden dungeon. He chose one of the skills and upgraded it to the highest level, gaining access to this level of power for the first time. In addition, among the trophies was a rare item called Red Stone, a valuable material for upgrading equipment. If Shuhuan got it, it would be a serious problem. Therefore, Kang Hu decided to put off the discovery for now, but to do something different with the skill book. It was ideal for the assassin class, increasing damage when attacking from behind. Now, each subsequent hit on the same target will be 33% stronger. A great opportunity to try out a new skill. Now it's time to deal with Heo Jung Tai. The next day, Ye-rin and Kang Hu met at the Pyeongtaek subway station. The girl noticed that this was the first time she saw the guy outside the dungeon, and so she had an important question for him. For what purpose did he transfer 100 million won to her? To this, Kang Hu calmly explained that Cha So-hee was actively searching for him, but so far without success. And if even the slightest information about him surfaced, she would immediately be sent to the Yangpyeong district. But for now, everything is quiet, which plays into his hands. Ye-rin just chuckled, adding that there were rumors that Cha So-hee was literally burning hunters in an attempt to find the guy. However, she assured that the confidentiality of her clients is a sacred principle for her, so there is no need to panic. Kang Hu nodded and changed the topic, saying that he had caught Heo Jung Tai. The girl frowned, trying to understand what he meant, and he explained that he couldn't recognize him, which meant that even if he completed the task, the blue eye wouldn't get any money. Ye-rin looked at him attentively, not hiding her surprise. The guy amazed her more and more with his capabilities. She even asked if he should be called Yoon Sang-kyu or Kang Hu now. Hearing this, he cursed in his mind because this Cha So-hee was too persistent. However, he remained calm and replied that for safety's sake, it would be better to use the pseudonym Yoon Sang-kyu. The girl shrugged, accepting his conditions, and then they got down to business. Their client was already waiting. It turned out to be Yoon Sang-mi, and she had high hopes for Kang-hoo. He assured her that he would not let her down. After a while, an armored bus stood in front of them, protected by hunters wielding magic bullets. The cost of the service is outrageous, but the safety is top-notch. While driving to Ulsan, Kang-hoo decided to take a nap, but he was awakened by someone's whisper. Someone on the bus was discussing a plan of action. They were to attack earlier than expected and take out the target once and for all. He immediately understood what was going on, and that if these were guards, he had to be on guard. But he didn't show it and simply closed his eyes. At the same time, he summoned his sword. In his reflection, he saw a security guard approaching with a gun aimed straight at him. A shot rang out, but the bullet hit the passenger in front. Kang-hoo teleported away, leaving an empty seat in his place. Once behind the enemy, he used his new move, Beware of the Cold, and easily eliminated him. The bus was instantly filled with screams and chaos. The hunters screamed, cursed him, and were furious. But Kang-hoo quickly assessed the situation, and there weren't that many opponents. One of them turned out to be the owner of the Constellation Father of Music, and his ability allowed him to speed up recovery 5 times when listening to classical music. Yoon Sang-mi wanted to step in to help, but he stopped her with a gesture. The girl just grinned and realized that this was a great chance to see him in action. Kang-hoo activated blindness, causing his enemies to experience terrible pain in their eyes, then used chaos, rendering them disoriented. They rushed about, blindly attacking the air. However, one hunter managed to notice him, but the guy had already used his copies, confusing the enemies. Each opponent saw only one copy of Kang-hoo in front of them, giving him a chance to deal with them one by one. The bald man in the headphones went crazy and fired, but hit his own man. Kang-hoo instantly activated exchange and avoided the attack. Then quickly attacking, he left the enemy bleeding. The classical music lover appreciated his power, but warned him that next time he would not forget it. But the main character didn't wait and upgraded the blood flower to the ultimate level. The guard's blood literally evaporated, leaving only shells of them. But the owner of the constellation survived because music saved him. However, Kang-hoo wasted no time. The hunter reached for his pistol, but at that moment he was met with a sudden kick. He flew forward with force, straight at Kang-hoo, who successfully put his dagger out, and that was the end. Thus the bus fight was over. The guy was accepted by Yoon Sang-mi. The murder and theft of the contract by the constellation, father and music, went perfectly. Now the hero has decided that classical music will accompany his moments of relaxation. But at that very moment, he received a message from the Dimension Thief, who said that this was a waste of time. Meanwhile, Kang-hoo found something interesting. It was a glove that increased strength and endurance. In addition, he found new boots that increased his agility. Without thinking, he changed his shoes and decided to sell his old things. Yoon Sang-mi, twirling a lollipop, approached him and asked if he wouldn't even praise her. The guy didn't immediately understand what she was getting at, but the girl explained that she is an excellent assistant, no worse than the leader of the Taewha River. Hearing these words, he tensed up a little, because in Ulsan, this organization was only a secondary part of the novel. Only general details were mentioned about it. Now it has become clear that Yoon Sang-mi is one of its leaders. She announced the price of the task, which was 250 million won. It was necessary to bring Gong Tai-soo's left hand, but Kang-hoo did not bargain and agreed, setting his condition that in exchange for completing the task he wanted to meet with the leader of the Abyss. The Abyss is a powerful organization that opposes the Purification Guild. In the original, internal conflicts destroyed her, but he knew that his path would inevitably cross with them. Yoon Sang-mi found his proposal interesting and said that she would talk about it after the result. They arrived at the scene. There were few people willing to come here, or on the contrary, too many. Everyone has come for Gong Tai-soo's head. Yoon Sang-mi asked if he knew what fireworks were. Many hunters attack one target. Victims are inevitable, but those who survive achieve their goal. According to the script, Gong Tai-soo was supposed to survive this chaos, but Kang-hoo was going to change the course of events. He was not the only one who accepted the task. About 100 people gathered here to kill one criminal. Gong Tai-soo is certainly no ordinary guy. In Ulsan, he was considered a butcher, and he slaughtered everyone who stood in his way. Even level 200 elite hunters were expendable to him. Soon the crowd noticed him. Gong Tai-soo walked surrounded by his men. Kang-hoo noticed his left hand. She was wearing a glove with a red stone, and this goat immediately ordered everyone to get out of the way. The guy turned to Yoon Sang-mi, asking if she noticed his hand, and she nodded. This guy uses it 99% of the time when doing magic, which is why the quest is to take it. The hunters could not miss such a chance, and they waited for the moment when the squirrel would come out from underground. Then the fireworks will start. Kang Hu waved his hand at the girl and sent her forward, while he himself briefly turned into the store. There he found something interesting, a stone worth 500 million won. The guy quickly figured out what he could pay with and offered everything he had in his inventory. In exchange, he received a ring. The ring had a powerful pain-relieving effect and significantly increased endurance. But something else caught his attention. The guy thought about the fact that Gong Taisu didn't have a constellation, but all of his subordinates did. This meant only one thing: the real Gong Taisu was hiding somewhere. And then he saw him among the crowd, in a woman's dress and even with false eyelashes. The outfit was so convincing that even Kang Hu barely recognized him, and the crowd around him didn't suspect anything at all. Gong Taisu boarded the train undercover. Kang Hu could have entered the same carriage, but he decided to be careful. He ran across the rooftops, using his jumping skill. He watched the squirrel and his men. They arrived at the place and discussed their plan. The plan was simple, and Gong Taisu waited, anticipating the moment when the mercenaries would realize that they were surrounded. One of his men confidently stated that these guys don't even realize that they're going to fall into a trap. Once they get close, they're finished. But then something strange happened. The boss instantly tensed up, grabbed his weapon, and concentrated completely. A vague premonition stirred in their chest, as if someone was watching them. Shin Kang Hu, who was hiding nearby, finally realized why Gong Taisu survived the fireworks in the original story. His opponent sensed that there was someone on his tail, but he couldn't figure out who exactly. Meanwhile, everyone at the dungeon was getting nervous, and Yun Sang-mi couldn't figure out where Kang Hu had disappeared to. At that moment, one of her subordinates approached her and expressed concern, and suddenly the guy turned out to be a spy sent by the Purification Guild. After all, this is exactly how the White Rose team was recently destroyed. He began to wind himself up, thinking that it would be better to ask the Abyss for help. But Yun Sang-mi believed in Kang Hu since Ye-rin herself recommended him, which meant he had the skills and connections. She didn't have to wait long. Unexpectedly, she received a message. She ordered her people to get ready. Gong Taisu came out of the dungeon, and everyone around started making noise. They were about to attack him, but his guards immediately blocked them, and a real meat grinder began. The opponents tried to get the boss, but his men immediately threw sledgehammers at the attackers, turning the battle into chaos. One of the enemies tried to attack, but he covered himself with a comrade who managed to put up a barrier. And suddenly, bam, fireworks arrived. No one understood where he came from. One thing was clear: it was a trap. The real director of chaos was hiding nearby. Kang Hu had been closely monitoring the situation and had no doubt that something like this could be expected from the one who owned the shrine. Using mana tracking, he saw that there were several guards near Gong Taisu. At this moment, Gong Taisu received a notification that the accuracy of magic attacks had increased fivefold. Kang Hu waited for the boss's recharge to run out, and then he used the abduction skill and instantly pulled Gong Taisu towards him. He didn't even have time to understand what was happening. Gong Taisu found himself face-to-face with Kang Hui and didn't understand what the hell was going on. But when Kang Hu tried to pierce him with his sword, he dodged. However, the next moment, when the sword finally reached its target, Gong Taisu suddenly disappeared. He used the short jump skill. If this trick is limited by distance, then the best way to catch Gong Taisu is to be right behind him. Kang Hu suddenly rushed forward and delivered a bloody blow. Gong Taisu barely had time to activate his defense, but at that moment, fireworks started flying again. For a moment, everything was lit up with flames. When Gong Taisu opened his eyes, Kang Hu had already disappeared. He turned around and saw a guy who silently pointed his finger at him, and at that moment, a new blow hit the target. Gong Taisu howled in pain, cursing his enemy and promising to kill him. He prepared to attack back, but then he looked down and saw that his hand was no longer with him. She was lying on the ground nearby. Kang Hu wasted no time and used the abduction skill to take the severed limb and dash away. Gong Taisu screamed in rage and ordered his men to go out and deal with the guy, but wait. He looked back. His people were gone. They were all dead. It was Yun Sang-mi's team that cleared the way, and all the messages she received were from Kang Hu. He warned her that Gong Taisu would enter the dungeon, and it would be a hoax, and the real Gong Taisu would remain at a distance, and his men would be offered fire support. The plan worked perfectly. Kang Hu disappeared as quickly as he appeared. Yun Sang-mi was impressed by his work, but now she had another question. How did he so cleverly predict everything that would happen? Meanwhile, the other hunters realized that the guy they were hunting was just a decoy. Yun Sang-mi dealt with the remaining opponents on her own. Kang Hu wrote to the girl and reminded her of his promise, and she promised to sort it out after her business. At this time, Kang Hu had already met Ye-rin, who, having received the hand she desired, smiled contentedly. The guy was a real star. The news was full of articles about who took Gong Taisu's left arm. The identity of this mysterious hunter still remained a mystery, but one thing was clear. The plot was beginning to deviate from the original course of events. If before this only affected Gong Tai-su, now it affected Shu Huan as well, which meant it was time to be extremely careful. The girl asked if he would continue to cooperate. Kang Hu replied that yes, but only until a better offer came along. She seemed amused by this and smiling showed the new order. The target was a certain Chogu Bin, a killer who mainly preyed on minors. His location is Ground Zero. It was necessary to prepare properly before the sortie. Meanwhile, Shu Wan was watching the news in a relaxed manner, coming across an article about a mysterious hunter. He had no idea who it was, but he had a lot of fun reading the comments. Suddenly, an idea came to him. He called the Purification Guild's strategic squad and demanded that they collect all the information on the Gong Tai-su case. It was important for him to find the hunter who tore off his arm. At the same time, in the Suwon World Guild, a conversation took place between the head of the Dungeon Management Department and Kang Hu. Their first meeting was peculiar. It was obvious that the guy had come for a dungeon license, but the official Han Sheng-hyuk immediately stated that such things were not given out to strangers. Without batting an eyelid, Kang Hu offered 100 million won for the right to enter the Baltnam dungeon just once. Han Seong-hyuk blinked, considered the offer, and immediately agreed. The thought flashed through his head that this dungeon was a waste of time, and its profitability was simply non-existent. And he already mentally dubbed the guy a fool, but on the outside he only smiled sweetly and led him inside. As soon as Kang Hu entered the dungeon, the real battle began. He fought with various creatures, gradually raising his level, which had already reached 37. He noted that this time his stats are heavily dependent on endurance. The next opponent was the boss Baltman himself, the embodiment of a huge wolf. He looked at Kang Hu with a disdainful gaze and said that the guy had better get lost. Otherwise, there would be problems. He was too lazy to even take him seriously, so he called him a small bug. Kang Hu had no intention of wasting time on idle chatter. Using a short-range jump, he rushed forward. The boss grinned and, wanting to show who was boss, decided to roast the impudent fellow by directing a stream of lava at him. But the young man used Shadow Step, leaving a clone in his place. Baltman didn't like it, but he caught the smell of food. The lava rushed straight towards the illusion, and the boss happily devoured it, believing that he had dealt with the enemy. However, Kang Hu only grinned, because everything was going according to plan. He remembered the skill book he had kept ever since he absorbed Alicia's main boss. This moment was perfect to use it. By launching more and more clones, he distracted the wolf, forcing him to absorb one illusion after another. Baltman had no idea that among these delicacies there would be something special. Just as the wolf was once again using its power to roast and devour everything around it, Kang Hu was ready to act. Baltman suddenly tensed up because the taste was different. He looked at Kang Hu and decided that it was worth trying it himself, but then that same skill book appeared above him. Suddenly the system started throwing out warnings one after another. Skills are unavailable, weapons are unusable, and there were more and more of them. The wolf panicked and realized that he was left without a single skill. And Kang Hu, satisfied with the result, cast a disdainful glance at him and indifferently informed him that all this was just the result of his one ability. But even in this state, Baltman was not going to give up. He summoned a rain of fire, confident that it would be the end for his enemy. When the flames dispersed, Kang Hu was already standing behind him, ready to deliver the finishing blow. The enemy is defeated. The system notified him of an increase in level. Now he was at 39th. And most importantly, he acquired Catastrophe, a rare skill. This ability allowed him to copy the skills of enemies without penalties, even if they belonged to other classes. In other words, he could steal any skills and use them to their full potential. With such an arsenal, he was ready for the next stage of his journey, Ground Zero. Putting his thoughts aside, he continued to chew his favorite delicacy, the very one that helped him regain his strength. Soon the guy reached Seoul Station. It seemed like an ordinary place, but his attention was immediately drawn to a huge banner, Shihuan, depicted in all his glory. It turned out that the masters of the Purification and Fortuna guilds decided to unite. The Fortuna Guild is one of the most influential. Even America knew about it. And now their hunt for the fugitive was becoming world news. And as we remember, the 13 stars, the elite hunters, were not actually heroes as they were presented in the original story. On the contrary, it was they who played a key role in the destruction of the world. The team was connected to powerful forces and could easily manipulate public opinion. Even if they acted alone in the future, people would still see them as noble protectors. While he was thinking about the situation, a girl quietly approached him and smiling said that Seoul must be boring, because wherever you go, either the prices are extortionate or they want to eat you. Kang Hu was surprised by her sudden appearance, but he didn't show it. The girl tried to use telepathy, but to no avail. Instead, strange memories began to pop up in her head that shouldn't be there. She immediately became wary of the fact that this guy's level was really higher than her own. But Kang Hu had no intention of letting anyone pry into his thoughts. He looked at her constellation, Evil Ye Rin. This ability allowed him to obtain information about those who were lower in level and had no protection from mental attacks. Apparently, one of the 13 stars stood in front of him. At that moment, he received a notification from his captor that he had acquired protection from telepathy. Some mental techniques implanted pleasant memories of the caster into the mind, weakening the barriers of the mind, but unpleasant emotions, on the contrary, could strengthen them. The girl nodded and muttered that she had previously thought that only Shu-Wan in Korea had such a level of resistance. She took out a business card and handed it to Kang Hu, explaining that such cards were only given to those who were able to block her abilities, and if he suddenly became bored in his country, he could call her and enlist her help. Kang Hu looked at the business card. It was the Thieves Guild, one of Donjay's 5 strongest organizations. She was clearly not an easy player in this game. Soon the boy arrived at Ground Zero. Now it's time to look for the treasure. The guy understood that his main problem was his innate sensitivity to mana. He could feel it, attract it. But as soon as he overloaded his body, a wild headache and weakness immediately rolled in, as it had been at the very beginning. If this happens in battle, it's all over. So now his main goal is to get the Mad Salacium. This plant appeared in the original novel and was significantly superior to regular Salacium, completely blocking sensitivity to mana for 30 minutes, albeit with unpleasant consequences. However, in battle, it could save lives. The only problem was that it only grew in Ground Zero, and it wasn't that easy to get it since there was always a mad farmer living next to it. A creepy mob that was best not encountered without preparation. Kang Hu decided to act according to plan, numbering the search zones just like he did in the lottery, and went into battle. Along the way, he did not waste time and leveled up fighting monsters. The first enemy fell, but it was only a warm-up. Ground Zero is a true wild zone filled with mutants and deadly traps. Soon he came across the body of some guy. The strange thing was that there was practically no decomposition, although in this area, it always proceeds slowly. Kang Hu activated the mana tracking skill and realized that the corpse in front of him was not just a corpse, it was a trap set by the Black Conductor. This parasite lures hunters with various objects. If you touch the bait, ghosts will immediately attack you and haunt you forever. The sight of this body reminded Kang Hu of a situation in his real life, when the school bullies chose a new victim, a guy just like this. But now was not the time for memories. His target is the Mad Salacium, and he found it on the edge of a cliff, but getting the plant was not easy. Using the jumping skill, Kang Hu grabbed the plant, but at the same time, roots burst out of the ground, turning into a monster. They tried to entangle him, but he reacted in time, using a jump to dodge. He then activated teleportation, appearing behind the enemy and delivering a fire attack. Plus the attack from rear skill increased damage by 33%. The monster was destroyed and Kang Hu's level rose to 40. Now he has a new skill, evasion, a basic skill for assassins. Suddenly he felt someone's gaze on him. Without wasting any time, the guy used the jump to get closer to the stranger, and it turned out that it was a girl. She smiled and asked how long ago he noticed her. Kang Hu was slightly surprised. She reminded Jung Yuri of a classmate from his past. At school, she was an ordinary student, and her father was a successful businessman. But after her family's bankruptcy, her relationships with influential friends changed. The girl sweetly apologized if she had inconvenienced him with her observation, and admired the fact that he had not only been able to tame the mad farmer, but also avoided the Black Conductors so easily. Kang Hu silently took out his dagger and swung it with a sharp movement. The girl even closed her eyes, thinking that he was attacking her, but the next moment she heard a quiet sound. Opening her eyes, she saw that Kang Hu had simply killed the bug that was chasing them. She thanked him, but the guy just asked not to follow him and left. Although the girl clearly wanted to continue the conversation. Leaving her behind, Kang Hu plunged into the battle again. He was lucky and managed to get the Mad Salacium 5 times in a row. Now he had a reserve and could focus on the main task. But suddenly he noticed the angel monsters. They weren't supposed to live in this area. In any case, the guy returned to that same corpse and activated mana tracking again. Now everything has become clear. The real enemy is not the killer sitting on the body, but the one who controls it. The Black Guide is a being that is a mixture of many spirits. It creeps up unnoticed in the darkness and strikes a deadly blow. If it fails to kill the victim immediately, it will deprive them of their sight, their mind, and eventually force them to commit suicide. Kang Hu decided to play a tricky game. He created a clone using Shadow Step and made it look like he was caught in the trap. Then, with a sharp movement, he grabbed the weapon from the corpse. At that moment, the Black Crow, the messenger of the guide, rushed at him. But he again used the exchange with the clone, and the bird attacked the empty one. The weapon was now in his possession, and the young man had no intention of staying, but the crow was clearly in a bad mood. Enraged, she turned around, intending to tear him to pieces. Without wasting any time, Kang Hu swallowed the mad Salakium and rushed away. But the next moment, the black guide appeared before him. In a split second, Kang Hu leapt and dodged, activating acceleration, but the guide did not lag behind. The black guide had only 2 weak points. He could only be destroyed by a dark force equal to his own, or by divine light energy. Since there is already a force opposing him in this territory, it will pursue him until he disappears. The enemy was defeated. Kang Hu clutched the weapon he had taken from the dead man in his hands, but decided to leave it for now. The guy returned to the body, took out the deceased's card, and looked at the name. It meant nothing to him, but despite this, he knew that he had to give the body to the family. He covered the dead boy's eyes with his palm, as if saying goodbye to him, and then glanced at the horizon. The same girl continued to observe all this. Meanwhile, Kang Hu remembered his main goal of finding and destroying Chogu Bin. The documents for it were prepared by the victim's father himself, and apparently this task was something more than just the elimination of another scoundrel. Even Yarin warned him to strictly follow all the conditions. Kang Hu activated his mana tracking ability and soon found the target. At that moment, Chogu Bin was dealing with another victim, taking the glove from her. This guy had a constellation that literally rewarded him for kills by giving him new points. He was clearly about to kill someone else to level up, but then a weapon flew towards him. The assassin barely managed to activate the ice armor, but Kang Hu used his glove to return the weapon back. This was clearly not Chogu Bin's plan, and he became angry. He believed that every opponent was obliged to respond to him, but Kang Hu saw no point in chatting with this bastard. Chogu Bin wasn't just a maniac. He had a constellation that allowed him to use powerful freezing skills and enhance any cold-related attacks. Deciding it was time to end this fight, the maniac froze his weapon and, smirking, declared that if Kang Hu opened his mouth, he would silence him forever. He then threw a spear, and Kang Hu deftly dodged it using his acceleration, which further enraged his opponent. He gritted his teeth, deciding to check how much longer the young man could dodge. Chogu Bin was strong. His constellation gave huge bonuses, and his magical abilities surpassed those of Heo Jung Tai. There was no point in using blindness. The main thing was to break through his ice armor. Kang Hu rushed to attack using acceleration, but he didn't expect a catch. It turned out that the enemy could even freeze blood. He turned the frozen blood of one of the slain hunters into a weapon and attacked. Kang Hu managed to dodge, but realized that he couldn't avoid getting hurt. After activating Quick Dodge, he realized that there was a hidden effect in this skill, and when activated, a resistance barrier would appear that would increase the chance of avoiding damage. Chogu Bin frowned, but he wasn't too upset. He could still kill Kang Hu with one blow. The maniac was even bored, because from his point of view, the hero was just a trifle that he didn't want to bother with. But Kang Hu suddenly asked why he was killing children. Chogu Bin froze for a second, then covered his eyes with his hand, as if he felt ashamed. The man asked who the customer was. Kang Hu did not answer. Chogu Bin sighed and admitted that he didn't even know his victims personally. He enjoyed gaining their trust, pretending to be a friend, and then watching their disappointment and fear of death. He called them fools and considered them his toys. Kang Hu listened silently and said that now he would become his new toy. Using teleportation and creating several clones, he rushed into attack with lightning speed. Chogu Bin looked around in panic, not understanding where the real one was. For the first time, he felt fear. His skills didn't help. Chogu Bin was surrounded by copies of Kang Hu. He was in complete shock, wondering what the hell was going on here. Before he could even comprehend the situation, the army of doppelgangers rushed forward. Realizing that he had no choice, the enemy activated Ice Rampage and directed an attack at the guy. But it was just an illusion. At that very moment, he realized that Kang Hu had brutally outwitted him, which meant that his real opponent was already behind him. Gu Bing shouted, declaring that his skill would recharge faster. But it was not to be, because the young man instantly launched the flame stream, activated bleeding, and plunged his fiery dagger straight into the enemy's icy breastplate and heart. Despair flashed in the enemy's eyes, as if he had been harshly abandoned. The pain made it difficult to concentrate, but he gritted his teeth and still tried to counterattack. He swung his knife, but when he turned around, he realized that Kang Hu had outwitted him again. Here, the system gave a message that 25% of physical strength and 25% of mana would be spent to use skills. Gu Bing rushed back, but the youth had already raised the flaming dagger, preparing to put an end to it. Attacking from behind increased damage by 33%, so the ending was predictable. Kong Hu used decapitation and the task was completed. After finishing the fight, the young man turned on classical music because it was time to regain his strength. Even though he lost some health, the effect was noticeable. But then something strange happened, and it turns out that Gu Bin was still showing signs of life. He looked at Kang Hu with confusion. At that moment, the bell rang. It was the father of one of Gu Bin's victims, and also the customer. And upon hearing the man's voice, Kang Hu turned on the camera, showing the bleeding killer. Meanwhile, at Cha So-hee's office, she was shown the CCTV footage from Seoul Station. If you pay attention to the train movements, you can see that it was heading north, and she concluded that its route was to Ground Zero, meaning there was a high probability that it would return along the same route. So he ordered her subordinates to continue surveillance. After finishing the conversation, the girl was seething with anger because the pursuit of Kang Hu was turning into an obsession. She swore that she would make him pay for everything. Meanwhile, Gu Bin, bleeding profusely, suddenly began to beg for mercy. He muttered sorry over and over again like a broken record. The girl's father, looking at all this, ordered it to stop, and he hoped that his daughter, wherever she was, saw this and found peace. After thanking Kang Hu, the man closed his eyes, trying to hold back his tears. He quietly said that the public security organization could not do what the young man did, to which he only calmly replied that he was simply doing his job. But then Gu Bin, gathering his last strength, suddenly became bold and shouted for the young man to stop and for him to complete the task. As if by a click, Kang Hu activated bleeding without hesitation, and with a wild look in his eyes, ended the battle. The system reported that the guy stole the Ice Witch constellation. At that moment, another notification from the Dimension Thief appeared. He as always spoke in a sarcastic tone, declaring that the young man had received not a constellation, but a piece of shit. Like this idiot didn't even know how to use it properly. But Kang Hu decided to deal with it himself. He found one interesting item from the enemy's belongings, and judging by everything, if he sold it, he could get 1,000,000,000 won. Then another call rang, and it was Yerin. She reported that the client was satisfied and transferred another 2.5 billion on top. But it seemed that the young man was least concerned about money now, because he had a task for the girl. She didn't immediately understand what he was talking about, but he quickly explained that they needed to establish the identity of the very corpse of the one who had a connection with him in the real world. Yerin sighed, admitted that it wasn't that difficult of a task, and promised to take care of it. After finishing the conversation, Kang Hu suddenly felt someone's gaze. He turned around and, smiling, asked how long they would continue to follow him. In front of him stood the same girl, the same sweet eyes, a flower in her hair. She smiled and, as if nothing had happened, suggested going into a dungeon with a mid-level boss. In short, they headed into the dungeon, and Kang Hu had a strong feeling that it was about to collapse. The place looked like it had been built by dinosaurs and then abandoned. But even such ruins have a right to exist, especially in Ground Zero, where a lot of tasty morsels are hidden. The guy turned to So-yeon and said how he didn't expect the girl to actually come. However, any dungeon was a potential benefit, so he was only glad. Plus, this was a great chance to see her in action. If her skills were worth it, she could become a powerful weapon against the Purification Guild, and she was also his first partner. When they went inside, the girl immediately noticed an old inscription, half of which was erased. She asked if he could read it, and Kang Hu deciphered the Latin text without any problem. Anyone who stains their hands with blood will forever remain locked in this wall. Well, what can I say? A great start. Moving on, he asked what kind of boss they were looking for. So Yan explained that she had met this monster before. It was a long-range fighter with a defensive skill. She barely managed to get close enough to strike, but was unable to break through the defense. Hearing this, Kang Hu knew that the fight would not be easy. And then a crowd of monsters attacked them. They had a fearsome appearance, and the spears they held were clearly not intended for decoration. The guy didn't waste any time, activated teleportation, and found himself behind one of the enemies. A fiery attack, and the monster fell dead, but the other was already aiming a spear at So-yeon. Suddenly, the girl abruptly activated a new skill portal, and the spear disappeared, and then appeared right in front of the monster who threw it. It pierced him with full force. Kang Hu couldn't help but appreciate her skill and reaction speed. With this level, it is clearly not lower than 200. When they were about to reach their destination, the boss who had been watching them all this time finally showed up. While So-yeon was commenting on Kang Hu's strange skills in amazement, discussing how he was able to use abilities that were not typical for assassins, the boy did not foretell any trouble. Suddenly, something rushed past at breakneck speed, crashing into the wall. This wall was broken in half, and they didn't even have time to properly react. It was him, the main monster. a giant with a huge sword who declared that he must finish what he started. Sportula is a monster with long-range attacks and defensive skills. Kang Hu didn't waste any time and immediately asked So Yan if she could throw it right on the enemy's head. The girl wasn't sure, but the guy insisted. He dodged the boss's attack and the girl opened a portal. Kang Hu rushed into the teleport space, appearing and disappearing, which confused the enemy. Finally, he found himself at the right spot, high above Sportula, and delivered a powerful blow. But it was not to be, because the blade came across invisible armor, a barrier. Kang Hu realized that he needed to deal with the defense first. The monster went berserk and went on the offensive. He began to actively attack, but the guy took advantage of the moment. After waiting for perfect timing with So Ya, the young man activated the decapitation skill. The blade pierced the monster, causing it to roar in pain. So Yan, inspired, wanted to contribute as well. She teleported the guy behind her back, and while the boss was vulnerable, struck him with lightning. The monster has fallen. The girl beamed with joy, and Kang Hu received a message from the system that he had stolen the skills from the target. But what to do with the boss's body? Leaving it here is clearly not an option. As they walked further, a strange character appeared in front of them. He looked like a human, but something was wrong. As soon as they got closer, everything began to glow with a bright light, as if the dungeon was about to collapse. Without thinking, Kang Hu threw the dagger and its blade cut off the stranger's head. The system gave a message that the guy had destroyed the main boss. The next second, everything around was illuminated by an alarming red light. This meant one dungeon was reset. The guy immediately ordered So Yan to use everything she had to get out of here as quickly as possible. She began to open portals, and he realized that there was no time to waste. There was only one question spinning in Kang Hu's head. What the hell is going on here? He was starting to suspect that this boss had taken over the hunter's body, and he didn't have a second to figure it out right now. The only thing he knew for sure was that if he didn't get out, he would die. Without wasting any time, he summoned Salacium, which he reserved for extreme cases. As soon as he absorbed the plant, a crazy surge of strength rushed through his body. He knew, of course, that the effect should be powerful, but this was beyond all expectations. The pain instantly disappeared, his senses became more acute, and he rushed forward, activating his jumping skills at maximum speed, because he urgently needed to get out of this stone trap. So Yan watched him with difficulty, feeling the strength leaving her body. Looks like she overdid it with her mana when finishing off the main boss. Her fingers were shaking and her vision was swimming. So Yan clenched her fists and closed her eyes, feeling so helpless for the first time in a long time. But then, as if out of nowhere, Kang Hu suddenly appeared in front of her. After assessing her condition, he asked if she was injured. However, before the girl could say anything, a huge stone fell on them from above. The stone fell, but instead of crushing him into a pancake, it hit an invisible barrier with a dull sound. So Yan froze in surprise, because this barrier looked exactly the same as the one of the boss they had defeated recently. Kang Hu didn't waste time explaining. Without further ado, he picked her up on his back and, activating his jerks, rushed towards the exit. Before making the final leap, he told her to hold on tight, and within seconds they were out of the collapsing dungeon. Exhaling, the guy realized that the situation was too close to fatal. He couldn't believe how timely he was when he got the mid-boss skill, because just a little bit more and they would have been gone. In addition, by raising his skill level, he was able to reduce the cooldown of his self-defense skill, which meant that it would be easier for him in the future. At that moment, So Yan looked at him with gratitude, because if it weren't for him, she wouldn't have been able to get out. She plucked up the courage and decided to tell her story. She previously held a leadership position in the Purification Guild. At first, she was just a guide, directing hunters to clear dungeons, but one day Kwang Hyun approached her and assured her that Purification was a guild that always did everything possible for the safety of its members. She believed these words and joined them. But at one moment, everything changed. During one of the raids, So Yan was seriously injured. When Kwang Hyun realized that she could no longer participate in the cleanup, he simply abandoned her and ordered the others to leave the dungeon, stating that there was no point in wasting time on her. She shouted after him that his words were a lie, and everything he said about protecting his subordinates was empty talk. Kwang Hyun simply replied that there was only point in caring about the team when their lives were valuable, and those who could no longer be useful were simply written off. He called her just a toy. Kang Hu was furious because he considered this to be comparable to murder. Leaving a wounded person in a dungeon is the same as killing him with your own hands. Only by making a contract with the space constellation did she escape death. But Kang Hu didn't believe in coincidences and said that constellations don't sign contracts with just anyone, and they saw potential in the girl. So Yan looked up at him because it sounded like a compliment to her. But the guy didn't seem to even realize it. He was just stating the obvious. However, the girl felt relieved as she felt a little better after she had spoken out. And yet, despite this, she felt lonely. At this moment, Kang Hu suddenly grabbed his head. A sharp pain pierced his body and he lost his balance. So Yan looked at him with fear and asked what happened. He clenched his teeth and answered through the pain that these were the consequences of Solakium. He just needed to rest a little and everything would pass. The girl silently came closer and, carefully touching him, began to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Anyway, after all this, Kang Hu stood at Imjigan Station, lost in thought. The memories of the girl with whom he had gone through so many dungeons did not leave his head, and he remembered their last conversation, her upset look when he said that he had to finish one thing alone. But he was sure that their paths would cross more than once. There was little time left before the train arrived, and he decided to hang out on Huntergram, a social network for hunters where important information was exchanged. While scrolling through his feed, he came across a post by Quan Hyun from the Purification Guild, who pompously spoke about how the key to success in dungeons is safety and teamwork. Kang Hu rolled his eyes because he knew this was nonsense. This man left his ally to die, and now he's suddenly talking about team spirit? Next, his attention was drawn to the headline that the Taewon River had established power in Ulsan. It reminded him of Yoon Sang-mi and the guy with the unusual hand who had been dead for a long time. Apparently, everything went according to plan. Moreover, he remembered that Yoon Sang-mi had promised to contact the Abyss once she had finished her business. This was her promise for the job done, and if she kept her word, he would soon have a chance to meet the leader of the Abyss. At this moment, the voice of the Dimension Stealer rang out. He suddenly praised Kang Hu for his actions, for the first time so clearly acknowledging his strength. Of course, it was a shame that we couldn't absorb the constellation Gong Tai-su, but overall the result was impressive. Then the creature wondered what the constellation meant to him. Kang Hu is a person for whom mutual benefit is the most important thing. Laughing, the creature noted that the guy was clearly impudent, but that was his peculiarity. He was not a simple hunter because he managed to summon him already at the 10th level. However, serious tests awaited him ahead, and if he succeeded, they would literally become one, and the Dimension Thief would give him even more power. Kang Hu was only happy with this prospect. Even if you think about it, could there really be any downsides to a contract with a constellation? The Dimension Thief answered this question vaguely. The guy understood that the constellations rule this world, connect the destinies of people with the system, but is everything so simple, and who stands above the constellations themselves? The Dimension Thief chose not to delve into the subject. Even if Kang Hu was the author of the story, he didn't know even half of what was hidden behind the scenes of this world. Kang Hu had no doubt that sooner or later he would live up to the expectations of his constellation, and then they would both reach a new level. My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden message signal. It was Yerin. She warned that Cha So-hee was at Seoul Station. The guy frowned because it was much earlier than he expected. This meant that his route was changing, and the final battle with Cha So-hee was supposed to take place after another dungeon. Looking at the approaching train, Kang Hu weighed all his options and decided that he first needed to go to Gwangju, where next to the terminal, there was a dungeon, and from there move on to Seoul. Arriving in the vicinity of the terminal, he concentrated. The only reason he chose this place was because he had official permission from the Public Security Department, and he was going to use it. Deleting the hunter's information made him almost elusive, but Kang Hu knew he needed to level up his skills before fighting Cha So-hee. He was just about to go into the dungeon when he suddenly heard screams coming from nearby. On a deserted street, several guys with knives surrounded a girl. She tried to call for help, but these freaks just grinned, enjoying her fear. The victim's lips were covered in blood, but she was not going to remain humiliated and silent and heaped choice curses on them, calling them scum. The words about Hyayan's guild immediately caught Kang Hu's attention. This gang worked for Changshu Huan, eliminating anyone who stood in the way of purification. Well, now it's clear that it won't be easy, but that only makes it more interesting. The guy noticed that one of the attackers had the constellation Master of Deception. It's a pretty powerful thing. At that moment, the Dimension Thief spoke up, looking at his prey with curiosity. He didn't expect to see something like this from such a pathetic guy. But since the chance presented itself, it was worth taking advantage of the situation. As soon as Kang Hu intervened, the entire gang began to hurl insults at him. Apparently, they didn't recognize him as a dangerous opponent. They attacked, but the guy used evasion skills and then activated decapitation on the constellation owner. The girl, stunned by such a massacre, looked at Kang Hu with admiration, while his new friends, on the contrary, looked at him with complete horror. Their boss lay in a pool of blood, and now there was only one thing left to do: take revenge. They rushed to attack, but the guy used acceleration and smashed them to smithereens. Messing around with those who didn't even have constellations was just a waste of time. Now he has a skill at his disposal that gives valuable items every 100 levels. The girl, who introduced herself as Jin Hyo Yan, warmly thanked Kang Hu for saving her and even asked for his contact information. He didn't refuse. As soon as he finished this task, a notification came that the dungeon was available. Meanwhile, Cha So-hee was in Seoul and was starting to lose her patience. Where is this guy, and did he decide to change his route? Her thoughts were interrupted by the master's call. He asked with obvious irritation why the hunt was dragging on. He had hoped that Cha So-hee would get over it faster, but now he was even hesitant about whether he should continue watching this performance. The girl clenched her teeth, and she would see this through to the end, no matter what it cost her. Suddenly, the investigator felt someone's gaze. Someone was following her. Without thinking, she threw the weapon towards the observer. During this time, Kang Hu continued to deal with the losers left from Hai Yan's guild, and when it was all over, he searched the bodies. Not a bad catch, and if you sell everything you find, you can get about 800 million won. Considering what he received for the mission with Chogu Bin, his capital was already approaching 5 billion. Now it was possible to swing at a level 3 weapon. Suddenly a message came from Yerin. She warned that Cha So-hee was getting closer, and it seemed that she had killed the man that Yerin had sent to her. Now her path lay in Gwangju. Kang Hu frowned in displeasure because she was level 250, had a strong constellation, and had a reputation as a ruthless hunter. Compared to her, he looked like a mere child on level 49. First, he went to the reserved dungeon to gain strength before the upcoming meeting. Meanwhile, in Gwangju, Cha So-hee's group had already taken control of the main entrance of the terminal. When she was informed that everything was going according to plan, the girl, with a satisfied grin, ordered them to continue. She hoped that Kang Hu would appreciate the chaos she had created for him. And then I saw him. He stood nearby, clearly ready for battle. Before that, he managed to go through the dungeon, where he encountered a serious opponent. Boss Sagana turned out to be a tough nut to crack because he destroyed 3 clones of the young man. Even long-range strikes, even close combat, it was all useless. Then Kang Hu played a clever game. Activated Shadow Step, and when the boss struck, used Clone Exchange. One moment and he's already in the safe zone. Taking advantage of the moment, he performed a bleeding strike, piercing the enemy. But that was not the end. The boss tried to fight back, but Kang Hu switched places with his clone again. After an unsuccessful attack, when the attack did not go as it should, the boss decided not to lag behind and launched a powerful hurricane. But Kang Hu wasn't impressed by such trifles at all. He just smirked and said that this boss would stay here forever. Then, without further ado, he used bleeding, finishing off the enemy and taking away his hurricane skill. Plus, he finally reached level 51. A new frontier, and in addition to it, the basic skill of the assassin class stealth has been opened. True, you won't be able to use it in combos with other abilities even at maximum, which is, of course, a bummer. Although if it were possible, it would be a blatant cheat. The Dimension Thief as always spoke up in time, hinting that the preparations were complete. Now he will be watching Kang Hu in his upcoming fight with Cha So-hee. But first, it was worth buying a few useful items to be fully armed. Let's move on to the present. Kang Hu had been sitting opposite Cha So-hee for a long time now, and it was obvious that he hadn't come empty-handed. The new weapon spoke for itself. The girl really thought that he would run away from her like a rat, but he, on the contrary, came out to meet her. The guy, grinning, looked her over from head to toe and asked how she liked his new toy, since he had specially taken her to hunt for people like her. The girl just smirked and then quite calmly invited him to join their pack. Kang Hu only raised an eyebrow because the question made sense because it was obvious that his answer was a firm no. To this, Cha So-hee only nodded as if she was not at all surprised. She calmly thanked him for his refusal because it gave her a reason to do what she had long wanted to do, to grind him into dust. A goal shone in her eyes, and the great sage of Kango constellation activated its ability to see the invisible. At this time, Yerin and So-yan were standing at the entrance to the toll road in Gwangju. They saw the chaos that Cha So-hee's team had caused, and So-yan was worried if Kang Hu was okay. Yerin tried to calm her down, so they got into the car and drove off. At that moment, something caught their attention, and their faces took on a surprised expression. There was a crowd of hunters standing right in front of the car. They realized that they had come to the right place. Yerin, without thinking twice, pressed the gas pedal to the floor and began to scatter the hunters to the sides. With a sarcastic smile, she threw out a phrase about how happy they were to see them. At this time, Kang Hu, seeing the constellation Cha So-hee, thought how stupid it was. But the girl, it seems, has long ago figured out his ability to create illusions and steal skills. Then she decided to simply burn it down. She put all her strength into the attack, trying to incinerate Kang Hu. He, of course, did not stand still and activated the jump. At the same moment where he had just stood, a giant column of flame burst forth, scorching the ground. Cha So-hee was furious because she was angry that she couldn't hit him. And that wasn't all. Her constellation Firesmith increased fire damage by 500%. She launched a few more attacks, but Kang-hoo deftly dodged each one and activated his protective armor. He realized that it was time to use the Mad Salacium flower. Apparently, Cha So-hee was losing her temper. Her anger grew stronger and her attacks more merciless. But Kang-hoo wouldn't be Kang-hoo if he didn't find a way to stand firm. He activated the strengthening of the protective barrier, bringing it to an extreme level. He was also glad that he had improved his weapon in time, and now his bleeding attacks had become many times more effective. Instantly, copies of the guy appeared around the girl, surrounding her in a tight ring. But she didn't even try to look for the real one among them. She just turned to the side. Her gaze immediately found the target. Meanwhile, elsewhere, So-yeon wasted no time in methodically taking down anyone who dared to stand in her way. The Purification Guild now resembled ruins strewn with the bodies of the defeated. Yarin came out of the room. So-yeon asked if she had dealt with the remaining enemies, and noticed that Kang Hui was not found inside. They realized that they had little time, and if he was not here, then he was already at the station. And there the fierce battle continued. Cha So-hee had no intention of playing around and summoned a fire dragon, which roared and rushed at the guy. Kang-hoo was impressed because the attack looked really powerful. She looked at him with disdain and declared that no matter how he tried, it was all useless, and none of his tactics would work against her. But Kang-hoo had long ago realized her weak point. She was not a master of close combat. Suddenly, he threw his weapon at her and missed. Cha So-hee burst out laughing. She covered his weapon with her foot and mockingly asked him why his hands were shaking from fear, and since he was aiming so poorly, maybe it was time to give up. With these words, she summoned the fire dragon again and launched a powerful attack at it. But Kang-hoo was prepared. He activated the hurricane skill, which easily engulfed the flames. Jin Hyo-young enjoyed this sight. She watched their battle with interest and even thought that it was good that she had not interfered in the showdown between the guy and her alleged offenders. It became clear that the girl was not so simple. Kang-hoo used abduction, pulled the investigator towards him, and immediately activated acceleration. In the blink of an eye, he was there and delivered a bloody blow. But Cha So-hee wasn't about to give up. She drew her weapon, met his attack, and asked with a smirk if he had already decided that he had won. The girl tried to attack again, but Kang-hoo took advantage of the jump, dodging her blows. He wasn't going to rely on luck. At the right moment, the guy called his weapon back, and with one easy movement activated bleeding. Kang-hoo didn't give her time to come to her senses. He jumped straight at her, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. Meanwhile, Jin Hyo-yeon received a call. The boss himself was on the line and asked how things were going. She calmly replied so that he wouldn't be surprised, but Cha So-hee is losing. This news was unexpected because was their best fighting unit losing its grip? Meanwhile, Cha So-hee began to realize that her situation was hopeless. Memories of the day she lost her parents flashed through her mind. She recalled how she took revenge on a woman who set fire to her parents' house. The girl killed her offender. But after that, her own fate fell upon her, and the arsonists' team decided to take revenge. They surrounded her, preparing to finish her off once and for all. Someone pulled out a gun and stabbed her in the side. They noticed that she didn't even have normal objects. She realized that she was losing. But it was at that moment that a stranger appeared in front of her, and now her boss. He cast an icy glance around the area, saw what they had done here, and without further ado, activated his abilities. The next moment, her enemies were scattered in all directions. The territory belonged to Eclipse, and whoever approached Cha So-hee was the one in charge. He looked at her carefully and clarified that it was they who had caused such chaos with her. The girl nodded, and he only said that it was time to get down to business and ordered her to follow him. Another conversation with the master also popped into her head. Then he said that if Kang-hoo agreed to work with them, he would be able to give her serious competition. These words made her extremely angry. Who is this guy anyway? Where did he come from? And does he really want to take away her powers? She yelled at Kang-hoo to not even dream of winning. The guy was a little shocked. Just a moment ago, Cha So-hee was shaking with fear, and now she was burning with rage. However, her fighting spirit played into his hands. The girl used her fire skill, causing heat to form around her, and told him to feel free to come closer. The guy just snapped his finger, but nothing happened. Now he was surprised. And Cha So-hee burst out laughing. She was sure she was right and asked how it felt to realize that there was nothing you could do. After that, she activated Fire Rain, raining flaming drops down on him. Kang-hoo instantly used evasion to dodge, but it was obvious that her element was fire, and she controlled it masterfully. If the girl continues to attack, she won't last long. So he activated his protective armor and jumped closer. Cha So-hee smiled and was about to finish him off, but meanwhile, So-yeon and Yarin were busy with hunting. It seemed that no matter how much they dealt with their enemies, their numbers only increased. They realized that they needed to speed up and rushed back into battle. Suddenly, Yerin noticed Kang Hu. He fought with Cha So-hee on the roof of the building. The girl was not going to give up, but the guy thought that it was even for the best since she herself came closer. It would be easier. He teleported behind her to attack. But Cha So-hee already knew this trick. She broke through his barrier and plunged the knife into his chest. Kang Hu suddenly called the weapon back and activated the glow, then struck back. Not far away, Jin Hyo-young was still watching the fight. She looked, trying to figure out if they were finished there or not, but suddenly something else caught her attention. Meanwhile, Kang Hu made an unexpected decision. He didn't kill Cha So-hee, but simply cut off her hand. The girl howled with rage. With one arm, she still wasn't going to give up and activated her abilities again, shouting that she would destroy him. The guy didn't understand what was going on. The effects of the mad Salakium were about to wear off, and he reactivated his protective armor. But Cha So-hee launched a powerful attack at him. She was furious and said that she would wipe him off the face of the earth. Kang Hu wasted no time in using wind magic to neutralize her power. And then So-yeon ran up to him. She screamed his name, clearly worried. Cha So-hee, seeing her, was simply furious. Because why is this girl getting involved in her fight? But the surprises didn't end there. Yerin also appeared nearby. Yerin stood in front of Kang Hu and calmly said that the girl didn't seem to realize the situation she was in. But Cha So-hee didn't care and said that she would be happy to deal with Yerin as well. When Yerin was already preparing to defend herself, Cha So-hee suddenly disappeared. Kang Hu immediately used the tracking skill. He had long felt that something strange was bothering him in this fight. And then I realized it was about her last constellation, Master of Survival. This skill allows you to copy the enemy's abilities in a simplified version. The guy turned on mana tracking and realized that she had copied his stealth and was now not going to attack. Kang Hu told the girls that Cha So-hee had run away. Yerin was sure that they should follow her, but then the effect of the mad Salakium wore off. The guy fell down exhausted. So-yeon immediately ran over, her voice trembling with anxiety. She literally rushed to him with tears, asking if he was okay. Yerin assessed his condition and said that he urgently needed to rest, and the best option was to go to the hospital. And Cha So-hee was still seething with anger. She was irritated by everything, especially by the fact that Yerin so calmly intervened in her fight. But she couldn't get rid of the main thought. Who is this Kang Hu? Because his skills are beyond reality, and he uses the abilities of monsters from the dungeons. How? She was about to tell the master everything, but then Jin Hyo-yeon ran out from around the corner. The blow dealt to Ha-young was impressive, and in order to at least somehow understand the situation, so he decided to listen to what they were going to tell her. It turned out that the master himself gave the order to remove it. This news clearly threw her off track. Meanwhile, Kang Hu woke up in the hospital. Next to him, right next to his bed, sat So-yeon, muttering in her sleep, "Brother." Without waking her, he quietly left the room, put on headphones, and turned on classical music to somehow come to his senses. At that moment, Chan Yuri wrote to him that she had accidentally found a crazy Salakium and sent him a photo. She also said that she had her own little old man, but Kang Hu didn't get what she was talking about and simply put his phone down. In the hospital corridor, he ran into Yerin. She was sure that her prediction was correct. Something had to happen to him, and now he urgently needed to rest because his body was clearly not in the best shape. The guy took out his headphones and asked how Cha So-hee was doing. Yerin didn't immediately understand what he was talking about, but he explained that he didn't expect people from Eclipse to get involved. The girl assured him that there was no need to worry. These Eclipse weaklings were no match for her. Kang Hu nodded, glad that she was okay, and thanked her for her help, and also asked her to convey her gratitude to So-yeon. Yerin just snorted, as if to say, he could have said it himself. But Kang Hu thought it would be better this way. After all, in the original story, the girl was very attached to the guy, but in the end, she died. Next, Yerin decided to discuss with him the body he had recently handed over. It turned out that it was problematic to establish the identity of the person using the hunting license. There is a possibility that it is fake. Yerin explained that they would need more time to investigate. The guy didn't really care and let them dig around as much as they needed. Besides, Yerin said that they don't have any information about Cha So-hee. It's become too quiet after that mess. The guy suggested that the matter might have been hushed up, and the girl agreed with him. However, they put too much effort into taking out Kang Hu, even sending the guild leader after him. Then he asked her what she thought about Cha So-hee. Yerin shrugged, and she wasn't even sure if anyone knew what happened to her, but most likely she was eliminated. Kang Hu recalled how, when he was collapsing from exhaustion, he received a notification from the Dimension Stealer that he had lived up to his status. If he wants to take it to the next level, he just needs to let you know. His relationship with Cha So-hee was complicated, but thanks to her, he had a chance. So he told Yerin that he was going to leave. She only warned that they might start hunting him, but he wasn't worried and would find a place where they would definitely not get him. At this moment, Shi Huan was hanging out on Huntergram, reading the news about the Daijin gang's attack on the Guangzhou Guild. This really pissed him off, and he actually wanted to win them over to his side. But lately, everything had been going wrong. The Ulsan Guild still hasn't found out who took Gong Tae-soo's left arm because there's not enough information. Enraged, he called someone and ordered them to find out the reason for the clash between Eclipse and the Haiyan Guild, as well as get the CCTV footage. Meanwhile, Kang Hu was standing in some high-rise building and getting ready. The Dimension Thief reminded him that if he died, that was it, the end. But the boy already knew this. He understood that he should challenge only after he became stronger, and he did not have time to hesitate. After receiving confirmation, the Dimension Thief moved it to the testing area. The crowd of spectators was much larger than he expected. This will be an interesting debut. The Dimension Thief, who took the judge's seat, greeted all the constellations and announced that during the test, Kang Hu would share the fate of his dimension and gain more power. Among the spectators were real monsters of the constellation, such as the Lord of Wild Nature, the Angel of Battles, and others. If the guy fails, he dies, but if he wins, new opportunities will open up for him. The constellations had to sacrifice holy power if they were interested in the fight. Kang Hu has chosen an opponent. The crowd gasped. The Lord of the Wild Nature chuckled because the guy really chose someone he could never defeat. The constellations began to donate power, the Shepherd of Justice, the Lord of the Wild. The power was accumulating, and the enemy turned out to be Shi Huan. Shi Huan specified his level, which was 47th. He clearly couldn't believe his ears. The guy is going to fight someone level 800. It's just suicide. He thought that Kang Hu just wanted to attract the attention of the constellations, but all he would show them was his own death. And turning to the audience, Shu Huan asked if it was a pity for them to go so far for such a meaningless battle. As soon as Shu Huan said that the guy should be given a head start, he immediately clarified that he was only using 2 constellations. Kang Hu, predictably, realized that this sly fellow would never miss the chance to appeal to them. After all, constellations are always eager to take leading positions, and as soon as they notice a profitable opportunity, they immediately want to sign a contract. Suddenly, the skilled manipulator intervened in the conversation, specifying the number of constellations, and the mad mathematician, a constellation, added that he couldn't wait to see Shu Huan's abilities. This entire crazy round dance of constellations was watching one single person, but as it turned out, Kang Hu had his own opinion on this matter. Having moved to another dimension, let us remember how Shu Huan instructed his subordinates to collect the necessary information. The coins were transferred and Eclipse found himself linked to the Abyss. This surprised him because the whole situation was so complicated. At that moment, he noticed a piece of paper with a post and questions that the Abyss commander was answering. Apparently, it was information about the Purification Guild. Shi Huan, filled with rage, tore down the leaf, not understanding why the Abyss commander was so motivated to seek the truth. People still only believe what they want to hear. Meanwhile, the commander of the Abyss, Lee Hyun-suk, Park Dong-jae's only blood relative, was preparing to carry out his plan. He called Yoon Sang-mi and mentioned that he heard about the events in Ulsan. It seemed like there was a lot of work to be done there. But Yoon Sang-mi calmly replied that they were just messing around with weaklings, and that a completely different person dealt with Gong Tae-soo. After a short conversation, Lee Hyun-suk suggested meeting her, praising her for her good work, and suggesting that they discuss their next steps face-to-face. Yoon Sang-mi was only too happy. While they were discussing their affairs, Kang Hu and Shi Huan were fighting. Although it would be more accurate to say that Kang Hu was defending himself more because Shu Huan's attacks were so powerful that they broke through his self-defense skill. He grinned as if to say, "Don't worry, I haven't even drawn my trump cards yet." And Kang Hu only has one thought in his head. Damn it, it's just like in the stories. His skill recharge is just crazy. Without protection against him, it would be suicide. He immediately activated the defense armor skill, and Shu Huan, looking at this, suggested checking how strong his clothes were. If he wants to survive, let him run. The next moment, the purple flame ignited, and Kang Hu barely managed to dodge it. But then the wind arrows came into play, and he realized that he had encountered something similar before, but this level was completely different. If even one arrow hits him, he's dead. Kang Hu used quick evasion, and Shu Huan activated Pure Darkness Seeker, which stabilized the magic, preventing mental and physical madness. The constellations began to whisper among themselves, discussing how resilient this guy was. The skilled manipulator noted with irritation that such opponents were the most boring. Kang Hu was shocked because his opponent simply dispelled the stealing skill. Huang thought with a smile that perhaps he should have overestimated his opponent's abilities a little. In a jump, Kang Hu created several copies of himself and rushed towards the enemy, but the latter used space control and the guy flew to the side. Next, the second constellation, the spatial guide, was activated, allowing portals to be easily opened and closed. However, Kang Hu did not give up. Using jump and shadow step, he maneuvered, forcing his opponent to constantly change positions. Shi Wan was curious to see how far he was willing to go, but ultimately he planned to burn his opponent's body. The purple flame flared up again, but Kang Hu used exchange with the clone and instantly appeared behind him. He threw the weapon, but Shu Huan used spatial mind and the dagger flew back straight at Kang Hu. Meanwhile, Park Dongjai, Lee Hyun-suk's close relative, encountered Yu Seok, the commander of the Abyss Squad. Park Dongjai asked sharply what was wrong, but Yu Seok silently signaled him to be quiet. Information was received and it turns out the Purification Guild has begun a hunt. The guy realized that the situation was becoming more serious than he thought. So it all started with Yu Seok realizing that someone was watching him, and Park Dong-jae. And this someone clearly had no intention of falling behind. Yu Seok started to get nervous but tried not to show it. Dong-jae, in turn, was also not thrilled about all this surveillance. He had already begun to lose strength, but Yu Seok was urging him on, and he needed to endure a little longer. Meanwhile, the weapon that Chang Shu-hwan sent back to Kang Hu flew back, but he managed to activate the protective barrier in time. Chang Shu-hwan became furious and decided that it was time to finish him off. He used oxidation on Kang Hu. Without thinking twice, he used the exchange, which made Shu-hwan realize it was useless. Then he went all in and opened a spatial rift. Kang Hu clearly didn't expect such a trick, and at this time, the enemy was firing deadly arrows. It was almost impossible to track them, and one of them still broke through the protective barrier, hitting Kang Hu. At the same time, Yu Seok and Park Dong-jae were trying to escape from their pursuers, but suddenly a group of strangers appeared in front of them. One of them took out a knife and ordered them to remain silent and freeze in place. If Yu Seok moves, Dong-jae is finished. At that moment, a gun was thrust into Yu Seok's back. He fell to the ground, and the kidnappers didn't even expect that everything would go so easily. They took Park Dong-jae away without any problems, and Yu Seok whispered apologies with the last of his strength until he passed out. When some men came running after hearing Dong-jae's scream, they found Yu Seok. He tried to say something, repeating only one thing, sorry. They realized that Park Dong-jae had been kidnapped, and they needed to start searching immediately. However, one of the men who was the most indignant suddenly laughed. He didn't care at all about this whole situation. Meanwhile, Chang Shu-hwan was turning to the constellations again, calling it an honor, but his attention was drawn to the fact that the dimension had not yet closed. Is Kang Hu still alive? By the way, he had already managed to recover, for which he even thanked Shu-hwan, because his empty chatter gave him the time he needed. Shu-hwan was simply furious. Having taken out a dagger, the main character decided that now he would definitely finish off this annoying rival. Shu-hwan used the assassin's loyalty and launched an attack, but Kang Hu deftly dodged it. It was a shock to the enemy. How could he even dodge? Meanwhile, something strange was happening in the abyss. Lee Hyun-suk learned that Park Dong-jae had been kidnapped and immediately went to Yu Seok. He could hardly stand on his feet and blamed himself for what happened, but Lee Hyun-suk told him not to worry. Now, the main thing is to understand who is behind this. Yu Seok assumed that this was an elite group of hunters working for money. They might be contacted through Park Dong-jae's phone soon. He also suggested that the Purification Guild might be behind this, as they have been acting too actively lately. Lee Hyun-suk ordered surveillance and warned them not to let the guild get to them ahead of time. At this moment, he mentioned that Yoon Sang-mi would also be arriving soon. Hearing this, Yu Seok only smiled slyly. Apparently, he had his own plans for this matter. Let's return to Chang Shu-hwan. He was confident that Kang Hu would not be able to avoid this attack. The villain sent a huge meteorite towards him. Kang Hu knew that if he dodged now, he would be able to sense the mana contained in the enemy's attack. He used his acceleration and dodged deftly. The Lord of the Wild and the vicious manipulator watched the battle, curious about this guy. Chang Shu-hwan attacked again, but Kang Hu used teleportation and appeared right behind the enemy. At that moment, he activated the decapitation. But at the most interesting point, the scene changes again, and now we see Park Dong-jae, who was tied up and helpless. He was ordered not to move, threatening to cut off his fingers. He didn't understand how he ended up in this situation, but he knew one thing. He was in serious danger. One of the hunters reported that everything was going according to plan, and they had captured the target as their boss had ordered. He was supposed to arrive in 2 days. At this moment, Kang Hu raised his dagger, aiming at Shu Huan, but he suddenly activated his chain skill. Kang Hu just smirked as he looked at his opponent and asked if he had already given up. After all, at the very beginning, Shu Huan assured that he would only use 2 constellation skills. And now it seems he is breaking his own words. It turned out that he had used the 3rd absorber, an absolute defense against attacks from enemies whose level was at least a third lower than his own. The system had already decided the winner, but Kang Hu wasn't going to give up. He activated the jump skill and smirked, asking Shu Huan if he was willing to take back his words. The constellations watched the battle with genuine interest. The fallen prophet was shocked and didn't even expect that Kang Hu would be able to successfully use the skill that was previously blocked for him. Another constellation, the war god of Battlehammer, also expressed surprise, commenting on how confidently Kang Hu controlled his abilities. He even admitted that he was looking forward to the continuation of the battle. Shu Huan's thoughts were boiling. He couldn't afford to lose to a guy who hadn't even reached level 50. The constellations began to hum. Could it be that Kang Hu had been hiding his true level all this time? Some believed that he simply did not have to reveal all his secrets because it was part of the strategy. In any case, Shu Huan was forced to admit that he had greatly underestimated his opponent. Meanwhile, Yoon Sang-mi was waiting to meet Lee Hyun-suk. She hadn't seen him or the rest of the team for a long time, and now she finally had a chance to fulfill her promise. She sent Lee Hyun-suk a message, and if everything goes according to plan, they will meet in Hongcheon in 2 days. Meanwhile, Kang Hu watched as Shu Huan activated a new skill. He thought it was complete madness. Did this idiot really decide to use such an ability right now? The constellations gasped. They would never have guessed that Shu Huan had such a skill, even though he was at a high level. Shu Huan laughed and said that he should have started with this, and he would burn Kang Hu to the ground. A huge scarlet flame rushed forward, but suddenly something went wrong. The wind swirled, and Shu Huan couldn't believe his eyes as he saw his attacks stop. It was forbidden by the rules. It turned out that the constellation had intervened in their battle, blocking Kang Hu from the blow. The Dimension Stealer intervened and stated that he would not allow people to go beyond the boundaries of his dimension. Besides, Kang Hu's test was over, and he had completed the task and could return. Shu Huan was beside himself, what the hell, but it was useless to argue. The Dimension Thief decided to erase Shu Huan's memory to avoid the consequences and send him back. Kang Hu realized that he had just been on the verge of death, but deep down he had always suspected that something like this could happen. The test was damn dangerous, but he passed it. The constellations continued to discuss the results, and the Dimension Stealer turned to them and said that, judging by the amount of holy power, the result was obvious. It was a stunning sight. The Lord of Wild Nature even envied such a ward. He stated that Kang Hu would be a good match for him too, and the other co-stars agreed that the guy was definitely worth checking out. Thanks to the test, Kang Hu was able to make a good impression. The Dimension Thief was apparently a little jealous of all the attention, but allowed the other constellations to observe him, at least for today. Congratulating him on completing the tests, the kidnapper said that after Kang Hu's return, he would gain new skills, and so he found himself back in his apartment. The level has increased to 101. The system confirmed that he had now mastered the new basic skill of the assassin class, Soul Imprint. This skill could be enhanced with an expanded Soul Imprint, depending on the strength of the constellation. It could now leave an imprint on 5 items. This is an ideal option because during the fight with Cha So-hee, he had problems with his weapon. Kang Hu wondered if he should leave his imprint on something useful. Besides, Dimension Reaver had just unlocked a new stat, but he doubted he would use it often. Suddenly, the system sent a new notification that he had reached level 100, and now the constellation of the Master of Yavi had given him a unique chance. The chance of copying one hunter skill is 100%. Kang Hu thought about it. If he could copy Shu Huan's Great Red Flame skill, it would be divine. Just imagine a killer with such skill. But the problem is that the right person is now in Danji. Just at that moment, the telephone rang. Yerin was on the line. She asked how he was feeling, and Kang Hu reassured her that everything was fine. The girl sighed with relief and got down to business, as it seemed the Eclipse Guild had finally quieted down. If so, she has a small task for him. It turned out that there was something that needed to be obtained in Hongcheon. A new mine was discovered in Hongcheon, where a rare freedom stone was hidden, a magical mineral needed to create special items. It was difficult to extract it, as special conditions were required, but the reward for the task promised to be worthy. Kang Hu decided not to delay, and the very next day went to the dungeon on the outskirts of the city. Using mana tracking, he quickly calculated the location of the stone. Turning on his luck to the fullest, the guy instantly completed the extraction, which caused genuine surprise to those around him. They whispered to each other, wondering if he was a top-level hunter. At this moment, Kang Hu's attention was drawn to a noisy scene. A boss was rudely scolding his subordinates, calling them losers who were disgracing him. He noticed Kang Hu and immediately suspected that he had hidden some stones for himself. Kang Hu quickly realized that this guy was no different from the other greedy miners he had met before. The thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of arrows piercing nearby. Someone launched an attack from afar, aiming at the loud gang around the boss. Panic gripped the miners when they saw that the attackers were wearing devil masks. Their skills were so strong that they instantly dispersed the gang of rude people. However, the boss was not going to give in so easily and ordered to surround the mysterious warriors and destroy them. In the ensuing fight, Kang Hu did not remain on the sidelines. Using a short-range jump, he intervened and helped the devil masks. The red-haired gang leader tried to attack him, shouting threats, but Kang Hu did not play at long showdowns and plunged a dagger straight into his side. All this happened so quickly that the girl he had just saved was in shock, and she didn't even have time to understand how the enemy had fallen in a matter of seconds. One of the men in the devil mask approached Kang Hu, and to his surprise addressed him with respect, calling him Lord. It soon became clear that Kang Hu had somehow spared the red-haired villain. Team Zhang bowed their heads before Kang Hu, recognizing his strength and justice, and the people gave Zhang himself the nickname Silent Judge. During the fight with Eclipse, the man was killed by Kang Do-hyun. The boy asked Jung Se-hyun how he knew his name. The Devil Mask leader explained that he received the information from a person who had infiltrated the Eclipse Guild. Then Kang Hu realized that now he was known to everyone in Eclipse, which meant that trouble would not be long in coming. Before leaving, Kang Hu offered to exchange contact information with each of the Devil Masks. It was an honor for them, and the girl from their team introduced herself as Pan Se-yeon. Kang Hu knew that the girl he was dealing with was an excellent supporter and was rumored to be a relative of Jung Se-hyun. According to the insider, the Eclipse Guild was still hunting for Kang Hu, so he had to be careful. The next day, he was already in Hongqiang, Guangwon province. The task seemed good, and the pay was quite decent. Ye Rin insisted on adding another 50 million won for the crystals she brought. Now there was only one task left. Yoon Sang-mi approached him and asked how he was doing, since they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The task itself concerned a mission related to the forbidden zones of the Abyss. Their path lay to the headquarters of the Abyss, located in the province of Gyeonggi-do. Upon arrival, they encountered security but were quickly let through. Soon, Lee Hyun-suk, the leader of the local forces, approached them. Yoon Sang-mi happily rushed towards him, greeting him as a commander, and explained that she had brought a new ally with her. She suggested calling him Yoon Sang-kyu. Lee Hyun-suk greeted Yoon Sang-kyu and asked him to wait a little. While examining the room, the guy noticed that the furnishings here were more reminiscent of an isolation ward. The reason for such caution was the kidnapping of Lee Hyun-suk's nephew. Kang Hu is here at the right time, and if he can win Lee Hyun-suk's trust, it will open up new opportunities for him. Meanwhile, Yoon Sang-mi found out that the kidnapping actually happened, and Lee Hyun-suk admitted that he acted harshly towards Kang Hu due to the circumstances. Yoon Sang-mi suggested entrusting the mission to Sang-kyu, since his skills had already proven their effectiveness. Lee Hyun-suk hesitated, as he was not used to trusting outsiders with such important tasks. However, the girl insisted that he was trustworthy. During the conversation, Yoon Sang-kyu honestly admitted that he wanted to receive the support of the Abyss. Lee Hyun-suk was surprised by his straightforwardness. He noted that the organization's reputation left much to be desired and that it had a long-standing conflict with the Purification Guild, but he was not sure that this was the best place to look for allies. Yoon Sang-kyu countered that despite the Purification Guild's partial control, the Abyss was successfully resisting them, which proved their strength. He also stressed that large guilds do not offer such favorable conditions for cooperation. Lee Hyun-suk thought about it, and if Kang Hui had immediately asked to join the ranks of the Abyss, it would have looked suspicious. However, he was reasonable in offering to build a business relationship based on trust. Kang Hu emphasized that he is not looking for easy ways, and if Lee Hyun-suk supports him, he will reciprocate. The man asked if he was afraid of the prejudices surrounding the Abyss. The guy just grinned and didn't care. Meanwhile, Donjae was still being held hostage. One of the kidnappers noted that the ransom amount was already high and asked whether the people who ordered it would be able to pay it. The partner replied that there was no doubt about it, since the Purification Guild was behind the kidnapping. The prisoner was taken to the farthest room and made to understand that his future depended on the whims of those who held him. Meanwhile, Ye-rin contacted Kang Hu, offering a mission to rescue the prisoner. A high reward was promised for successful completion. After receiving all the information, Kang Hu agreed and went to the Gimchin area. Finally, he was able to use one of his newly acquired abilities granted by the constellation test. At this moment, The security guards in the building were discussing the arrival of the client who was supposed to pick up Don J. Kang-hoo realized that this moment was his chance. Meanwhile, near Shin Tae-seok, one of the guards greeted the leader of the Black Bones gang, Shin Chun-ho. Kang-hoo knew he had little time, but he was ready to act. Shin Tae-seok was a reserved man, but he immediately made it clear that he had put a lot of effort and resources into this task. Shin Chun-ho, in turn, noted that perhaps they should have involved more people so that everything would go faster. However, he also stressed that the complexity of the mission deserves appropriate compensation. As one of the leaders of the Purification Guild, Shin Tae-seok wondered how much they would need. Shin Chun-ho offered to double the amount. The move seemed risky, but the benefits to the guild were obvious, and Shin Tae-seok agreed, deciding to check everything out personally first. Meanwhile, Kang-hoo fought a huge mutant enemy enhanced by drugs. The creature was called Madness because it was turned into a killing machine, devoid of any personality. Kang-hoo immediately realized that there were no guards nearby precisely because of this monster. Moreover, it noticed him by smell, and its instincts were heightened to the limit. Kang-hoo dodged it deftly using his acceleration, and he guessed that if that monster was guarding the door, then Park Dong-jae was being held behind it. While he was thinking about his plan, the conversation between Shin Tae-seok and Shin Chun-ho continued. The latter noted that even elite hunters would have difficulty dealing with Madness, and that there were many protective spells on the door. Suddenly they heard a crash. Something clearly went wrong. The madman continued to rush at Kang-hoo, but he managed to outwit him. Using teleportation, he confused the monster, then rushed towards the door, activating the skill boost. Shin Tae-seok noticed the noise and decided to check the situation himself. When Kang-hoo burst into the room, Dong-jae looked dumbfounded. He couldn't understand whose side the stranger was on. However, Kang-hoo silently took out his phone and showed him the QR code, which confirmed that it was sent by his uncle. Dong-jae knew he had to help, but he was too exhausted. Kang-hoo continued to avoid the attacks, focusing on the target and pulling out Dong-jae. He used acceleration, and before the thugs could react, he reached Dong-jae and disappeared with him, thanks to teleportation. At that moment, Shin Chun-ho flew into the room, saw the empty room, and grabbed his head in rage. Kang-hoo and Dong-jae appeared near the car. Their escape was successful. The boy noticed that it was much easier to fight next to Dong-jae. The boy thanked his savior, but Kang-hoo only chuckled, saying that it was not yet time for thanks. He still had some work to complete. Meanwhile, Shin Tae-seok looked at the empty room in anger. Shin Chun-ho realized that the situation was getting out of control and ordered Shin Tae-seok to be captured, blaming him for the failure of the operation. But Shin Tae-seok was no mere pawn, and he cut down the guards with his weapon in the blink of an eye. Shin Chun-ho was shocked at how strong this man was. And then he pointed the gun straight at Shin Chun-ho and made it clear that if he wanted to survive, he had to take action immediately. He ordered the plan to be revised and the hostage to be returned. At this moment, Shin Tae-seok wondered how the enemy knew about this place, since the request was placed in such a way as to avoid leaks, and even he himself came here in person to ensure that nothing would leak out. Shin Tae-seok sent a message to Yu Seok, indicating that he suspected surveillance. He ordered to change the meeting place and prepare everything for the reception of Don Ja. Meanwhile, in the abyss, Lee Hyun-suk sat nervously in his office, knowing that he had entrusted this task to a stranger. The search with Yoon Sung-mi and Yu Seok had made no progress, and he felt responsible for his nephew's safety. At that moment, Yu Seok called him, and it turned out that the kidnappers had contacted him and were demanding a ransom. Lee Hyun-suk was supposed to arrive at the meeting alone. Meanwhile, Dong-jae began to realize that Yu Seok was not on his side. The traitor thanked the guy for his help, but at that moment, Kang-hoo emerged from the shadows. Yu Seok froze, because the last time he saw someone else, he couldn't understand who was in front of him now. At this moment, Yoon Sang-mi also stepped out of the shadows. She hoped that it was all just a misunderstanding, but the situation looked different. Dong-jae listened to everything that was happening, analyzing. He realized that if the Purification Guild leader was behind this, then they were already combing through Gimcheon. Without thinking twice, he rushed towards Kang-hoo, and at that moment, Yu-seok began to get indignant, realizing that the message he received was not sent by Shin Tae-seok, but by Kang-hoo. Kang-hoo in turn advised turning off the phone to avoid problems. Yu-seok obeyed, but it was too late. He started yelling at Dong-jae, accusing him of betrayal because he had been suspected all this time. Dong-jae thought differently. The more he thought about it, the more everything fell into place. During the conversation earlier, Yoon Sang-mi said that there was a rat among them. He immediately thought of it, because the kidnappers would not be able to catch him so easily. Kang-hoo realized that if he had brought Dong-jae to Lee Hyun-suk right away, there would have been no chance of catching Yu Seok. Kang Hu now knew who Yuseok was, and he had evidence and even a recording. Meanwhile, at Jiang Shu Huan's headquarters, one of his subordinates passed on surveillance data from Songjung Station in Gwangju to his boss. Most of the records were damaged, but some survived. When he opened the files, he saw a video of one of the Eclipse members. Looking at Kang Hu, he realized that he had seen his face somewhere before. Meanwhile, Kang Hu and Yoon Sang-mi were talking with Yuseok. Yoon Sang-mi asked directly if he wasn't happy with being the second in command of the Abyss. Yuseok laughed, stating that this whole Abyss was a waste of time. All his strength and resources were being spent fighting the purification. He turned to Donju and asked if he understood what he was talking about. Donjae gritted his teeth and wanted to answer, but Yoon Sang-mi interrupted them, saying that it was pointless to continue this conversation. However, Kang Hu decided to listen to him until the end. Yuseok admitted that he had long planned to sell the Abyss to the Purification Guild. Now that the time had come, he had no intention of stopping. He grabbed his weapon, but Kang Hu got there first. Yuseok fired and a fire started. The three of them took cover, but suddenly a shot rang out. Lee Hyun-suk stood behind Yuseok and he fell dead. Donjae felt relieved when he saw his uncle, because now his nephew was safe. Lee Hyun-suk suggested returning to headquarters, but Donjae was not particularly keen. However, he had no choice. The commander also invited Kang Hu and Yoon Sang-mi because he wanted to thank them for saving his nephew. Kang Hu happily agreed, as he still had a few things to discuss. As the car approached, Yoon Sang-mi suggested that they take a short break. At this moment, Donjae decided to talk to Kang Hu. He asked if it was true that he was worse than trash, but Kang Hu didn't understand where that came from. Donjae explained that he was plagued by doubts because he knew his uncle was doing the right things, but he himself was not sure that he could live the same way. Lee Hyun-suk suffers from seeing his nephew suffer, and recent events have only confirmed his fears. Kang Hu replied that he himself was not ready to sacrifice his own safety for the sake of saving the world. He advised Donjae to live the way he wanted, but not to turn away from his family. Meanwhile, Jiang Shu Huan received a message that Donjae had disappeared and contact with Yuseok had been lost. Hearing this, he just smirked, and as expected, he made a bad choice. At the same time, Shin Chun-ho fell. However, his subordinates were ordered to burn everything and destroy the evidence. Chung Shu-huan couldn't think of anything except how he wanted to wipe the Abyss off the face of the earth. For now, it was worth focusing on something else. He remembered that Cha So-hee was behind this, so he should start with her. Meanwhile, at the Abyss's headquarters in northern Gyeonggi province, Dong-jae was resting in his room. Yoon Sang-mi asked how he managed to get out. He said that it was all thanks to Mr. Yoon Sang-kyu, who used a secure message to send the necessary information. Tomorrow, Dong-jae was finally going to tell his uncle the truth. In another room, Lee Hyun-suk thanked Kang Hu for saving his nephew. Kang Hu replied that he was just doing a task. The conversation then turned to Yuseok. Lee Hyun-suk admitted that he trusted him too much, and the betrayal was a blow to him, and if it weren't for Kang Hu, everything could have ended in tragedy. He asked if he could reconsider his decision to cooperate. Kang Hu admitted that he had his own interests, since the feud with Purification affected him directly. Lee Hyun-suk realized that he was not just dealing with an ally, but a person who had consciously chosen his side. He handed Kang Hu a business card and told him that if he ever wanted to talk, he should use it. The next morning, Dong-jae and Lee Hyun-suk were arguing. Dong-jae insisted that he would stay in the province, but Lee Hyun-suk did not agree with this. Kang Hu advised the boy to turn to him for help in the future. They exchanged contacts. Kang Hu was about to leave, but Yoon Sang-mi was upset, hoping that he would stay late. However, she wished him luck and said that she would look forward to meeting him again. They shook hands and Kang Hu left. At that moment, Ye-rin called him. She reported that she had found the identity of the discovered body. Meanwhile, Jiang Shu-huan was studying the documents regarding Cha So-hee. Apparently, she was sent a fugitive from the Chanmian camp. For the sake of one fugitive, they threw so many forces, and where is she now? Jiang Shu-huan asked his subordinate, who said that he was looking into the matter. It turned out that she had been removed from the case, and the territory was now under the control of another person. In addition, it has become known that they are pursuing Cha So-hee. Jiang Shu-huan thought that she had failed because earlier she had pursued the goal herself and even entered into battle. Most likely, the girl is hiding under a fake name. He was also informed that the Kyonin Guild was providing support in the Abyss. At that moment, he remembered that Ye-rin had once suggested that he meet a hunter. Could it really be that same man? He should have asked her personally, although the likelihood that she would send him away was high. For now, he decided to leave the matter aside and ordered the workers to continue searching. The guild had a good image, and finding a valuable hunter was of utmost importance. Meanwhile, at the VIP market, the guy met someone important. Chairman Kan was due to arrive immediately after the deal was completed. The girl apologized to him for waiting, and he thought that he would never have guessed that this corpse was connected to Kang Ba-kwan, the owner of the VIP market and an influential businessman. In the original story, this character was created purely to enhance the stats, but now he has become more than just an NPC. Suddenly, Jong Yuri appeared in front of him. She was surprised to meet him in Busan and asked what brought him there. Jong Yuri noticed his thoughtfulness and asked why he didn't respond to her messages. She admitted that she was waiting for an answer from him. The guy just looked at her in surprise. In any case, she was glad that they met and wanted to give him the crazy Salacium, as well as something else. It turned out that her grandfather was the only one who could grow this rare plant, and now he had an heir. Young Yuri felt grateful to Kang Hu, because thanks to him, she was able to escape from Ground Zero and reunite with her family. Kang Hu replied that he was just doing what he could, but the girl insisted that if it weren't for him, she would never have believed her grandfather. She said that the old man had a granddaughter with the same name, and perhaps that was why he became attached to her. In the original story, her life was filled with revenge against the Purification Guild, but now everything has changed. Kang Hu asked what brought the girl to the market. She said that she came to meet the woman who had now become her family. Her name was Kang Ba-kwan, and she is the owner of this market. She also thanked them for taking away the body of the deceased. Since he has no relatives left, she will take care of his funeral. Kang Hu was surprised and asked if he wasn't a family member, but Kang Ba-kwan replied that this man was dear to her. He dreamed of becoming a hunter and was happy when he was accepted into the Purification Guild, but why he ended up in Ground Zero alone, it looked strange. Kang Hu thought that perhaps he was simply abandoned to hide something important. Kang Ba-kwan handed him the items found on the deceased. It turned out that it was a gift from this grandmother. She also ordered the weapons to be brought and then asked if Kang Hu liked them. The guy couldn't believe it, because such a weapon cost hundreds of billions. He was also given a new awakening skill that allowed him to absorb the stats of destroyed weapons. Kang Hu asked if this was true, and Kang Ba-kwan replied that it was gratitude for him returning the body of the deceased to her. She planned to give this blade to the deceased if he returned alive. At that moment, Yoon Sang-mi turned to Kang Ba-kwan and asked if she was heartbroken. Kang Ba-kwan asked her name and froze, remembering her granddaughter. She and her husband often thought about her, but this only led to discord, and she coped with the loss. But her husband could not. But now, at last, she felt relief. Grandma said that Yoon Sang-mi can come to her whenever she wants. As they exited the market, Yoon Sang-mi stated that the purification was behind all of this, and she hoped that someday they would pay for their crimes. Time to go. Kang Hu thought that Master K might have useful information about mana hypersensitivity and asked Yoon Sang-mi if he could go with her. She just looked at him in surprise. Meanwhile, far from civilization, Cha So-hee was hiding in a shelter. Her body was aching from injuries, and it was all because of Jin Hyo-yeon. Remembering their conversation, she couldn't believe that she was right. She did everything she could to help that guy, but now everything was falling apart. And suddenly she noticed that she was being followed again. Jin Hyo-yeon appeared again. Cha So-hee pointed a gun at her, demanding that she leave. However, she only grinned and tried to be kind, but since that was the case, she would do otherwise. The girl raised her hand and energy flared around her. Meanwhile, Kang Hu and Yoon Sang-mi arrived at the appointed place. The girl said that Salacium is grown in Ground Zero. The guy realized that his subconscious was creating unexpected details in this story. Suddenly they heard footsteps. Master K stood in front of them. He looked at Kang Hu with a smile and said that he had heard a lot about him. Kang Hu was pleased because thanks to Jung Yuri, he was able to meet a person who was extremely difficult to meet. Master K thanked him because he helped not only Chung Yuri, but also his wife. He mentioned that their precious boy had recently been to him, but soon after, an accident happened to him. Kang Hu was surprised that Song Min-jun was here. The master confirmed that he had come to arrange for the supply of medicinal herbs between the guilds, but had requested rare medicines that Master K did not usually work with. Kang Hu was immediately wary, and since purification was behind this, perhaps he was used and then simply eliminated. The guy asked to tell him more about those very medicines, but the master suggested first finding out why Kang Hu was here. He explained that he had some medical problems and extended his hand for examination. The master examined it carefully and became confused. Meanwhile, Cha So-hee and Jin Hyo-yeon are in a fierce battle. The fire engulfed everything around. In the midst of the battle, Cha So-hee lost sight of her opponent, but she suddenly appeared behind her, ready to deliver a fatal blow. Jin Hyo-yeon mockingly noted that Cha So-hee continues to fight until the end even though it no longer makes sense. However, she was ready to fight as long as it took. Her enemy planned to burn her to ashes. Suddenly, Jin Hyo-yeon appeared in a new appearance. She stated that Cha So-hee was already too weak due to her injuries, and her flame was losing its power. It was time for the final blow. Meanwhile, Master K continued to study Kang Hu's hand. He came to the conclusion that he had an extremely rare reaction to buffs, causing a sharp decrease in stamina when using a large amount of mana. This condition was akin to an organic limitation that prevented him from reaching his potential. Kang Hu asked if Master K could sell him the Mad Salacium. However, he explained that he tries not to spread it because of the high danger. At this time, Yun Sang-mi was preparing dinner, a fragrant pasta with seafood and cherry tomatoes. Kang Hu tried it and was delighted. Master K spoke of important information. He suggested that Kang Hu go to the Dungeon of Limitless Mana. The guy was surprised, because this place was not accessible to everyone. Yun Sang-mi was delighted, but the master quickly cooled her enthusiasm by explaining that the dungeon was under the control of a criminal organization affiliated with Eclipse. They demanded huge reserves of mana as entry fees. Kang Hu remembered that this dungeon was mentioned in the original story, but he had no idea that it actually existed. Despite the danger, it was a great place for rewards. Master K said he would check the stocks of the Mad Salacium. At that moment, Kang Hu turned to Jung Yuri and carefully explained that Song Minjun's death might be related to the Purification Guild. He continued that her grandfather might have known the truth. If we can figure out what the unknown substance was that was involved in the deal, we might be able to uncover the true cause of his death. Suddenly, Shin Tae-seok appeared in front of Cha So-hee and handed her a card inviting her to the Purification Guild. He invited her to the Purification Guild. Later, Master K gave Kang Hu some pills, which were a concentrate of the Mad Salacium. He warned that they should only be used as a last resort, as the consequences would be severe. This time he gave them for free, as a token of gratitude. Jung Yuri said goodbye, telling him to be careful. Master K turned to his assistant and asked what he thought of the boy. The man admitted that he sees potential in him, but he still has a long way to go. The next day, Kang Hu arrived at the club that Master K had spoken about. It looked like an ordinary establishment. Suddenly, Jin Hyo-young appeared behind him. The guy remembered that last time he saved her from the guild's pursuers. Judging by her level, she was far from weak. He didn't ask any questions then, but now he decided to take advantage of the moment. He asked if it was true that there was a dungeon in the club. Jin Hyo-young nodded. She heard that the entrance was in an underground parking lot, which was heavily guarded. In her opinion, there may also be protective barriers there. The barriers were certainly a problem, but now Kang Hu had a chance. Jin Hyo-young suggested exchanging contacts, since last time, according to her, he gave her the wrong number. The guy smirked and said that she could repay him right now by helping him get into the dungeon. The girl agreed. The guy noticed that they were being followed. He pulled Jin Hyo-young towards him sharply, telling her to look only at him. In response, she suddenly kissed him. Kang Hu decided to deal with this later, but the main thing now was to get inside. Jin Hyo-young used her skill to dispel the barrier. It helped more than Kang Hu expected. At that moment, Kang Do-hyun appeared. Finally, he met Kang Hu face to face. Kang Hu realized that the protective barrier had distracted all the guards, which meant he had a chance. Until now, no one had been able to enter the dungeon, but now the door was open. As soon as he entered, strange sounds were heard. They were monsters, small, reminiscent of slugs. Jin Hyo-young entered the dungeon with Kang Do-hyun. She frowned, realizing that the situation had changed. They didn't expect Kang Hu to actually be able to get here, and the girl asked what to do now. Kang Do-hyun looked at her thoughtfully and said that it was worth watching for now. Meanwhile, Kang Hu was fighting a group of small slimes in the dungeon. He froze them using the Ice Witch Constellation ability, which enhanced his ice attacks. If he had any hidden skills, now was the perfect time to test them. Most of the monsters were immune to physical attacks, except for one large slime king. The fight began. The slime king tried to attack with jumps and dashes, but Kang Hu, using speed and agility, aimed the weapon straight at the obsidian stone on his head. After winning, he received a valuable obsidian crystal. The reward was better than he expected. However, he was even more surprised by the skill he stole from the monster cutie. And the essence of the skill was that you need to shout cutie, and a medium-sized slime will appear, capable of blocking physical attacks for 30 seconds. Although it felt weird to shout the name, the ability turned out to be useful. Kang Hu already imagined how he could use it. Before going into the dungeon, Master K asked him to find rare plants, including mingora, wild ginseng root, and others. According to the master several years ago, foreign hunters discovered another dungeon of unlimited mana, in which unusual plants grew. One of the researchers, a botanist, claimed to have found unique herbs inside. Kang Hu asked if this meant that he could find the plants he needed there. Master K explained that the environment inside the dungeon could indeed allow rare plants to grow, and if he found Violante, he should definitely collect it. The master's assumptions turned out to be correct. Kang Hu discovered many useful herbs. but his path was blocked by monsters, stone turtles. On each of them grew medicinal plants such as ginseng, mandrake, and udambara. Kong Hu chuckled and thought that at least he wouldn't have to search for them all over the dungeon. Meanwhile, Master K was discussing his health condition with his brother. He admitted that he himself was not against going into the dungeon, because rare herbs could be found there, but he still knew his body better than others. Medicines couldn't help him. Even if Kong Hu had gathered everything he needed, the chances of a cure were low. However, he was not going to give up. The reason he sent Kong Hu to the dungeon was not only for his brother's health, but also for Violante. The Purification Guild wanted to make a deal with him to obtain this plant. Zhang Yuri, having overheard the conversation, realized that this was exactly what Kong Hu wanted to know. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Kong Hu had collected almost all the plants on the list, but he knew that there was still much to do. Suddenly, a powerful blow fell upon him. He barely managed to dodge before he saw a huge monster in front of him. It was the boss, the Lord of Life Forces. All the remaining rare herbs grew on it. The monster spoke up, claiming that Kang Hu had not only invaded his domain, but had also encroached on his power source. He had no intention of letting the uninvited guest go. Kang Hu activated the weapon he received from Kang Bakuan and prepared to fight. Master K's conversation with his brother continued. He asked if he had refused to cooperate with the purification, and if there was any point in searching for this plant. Master K replied that he had no intention of doing business with them, but if Kong Hu brought Violante, they could find out why the Purification Guild needed it so much. Meanwhile, Kong Hu continued to dodge the attacks of the Lord of Life Forces. Huge tentacles covered with sparse plants tried to catch him. He knew that he could not leave without a fight, and he prepared to deliver the decisive blow. The boss sneered and said that Kang Hu could try as much as he wanted, but he couldn't break through his armor. Meanwhile, the guy felt that the effect of the crazy Salakium was coming to an end, and side effects would soon begin. But it was impossible to drag it out for long. It was time to end the fight. At this time, Master K continued the conversation. He thought that if Kang Hu could get Violante, he would be able to find out why the Purification Guild was so desperate to get this plant. Zhang Yuri, having overheard the conversation, only confirmed her suspicions. At that moment, the master's assistant suddenly started coughing and blood started coming out of his mouth. The master asked him worriedly if he was okay, but he just waved his hand. Apparently, the journey he had to take to get treatment had an effect. Meanwhile, inside the Eclipse dungeon, mana potions were being actively used, but there was no sign of the gate opening. Jin Hyo-yun, having obtained the last potion, was apparently extremely irritated. She bought up everything that was sold nearby, but the situation became increasingly difficult. Kang Do-hyun decided to change tactics and ordered all the fighters to be gathered. Kang Hu used shadow steps and position swaps to get closer to the target plant while creating illusions. The Lord of Life Force watched him, not understanding what his opponent was planning. But when Kang Hu got close enough, the monster attacked, unleashing a huge wave of power on him. Kang Hu barely dodged, knowing that even the slightest hit would be fatal for him. At this moment, he used Wind Dash and then activated Soul Seal and Decapitation attack. The blow proved decisive and the ruler fell. Along with the victory, he received a new skill, Age of Barbarism, which increases maximum health by 20%. This somewhat eased the side effects of Salakium. Prizes included obsidian crystals, Violante, and ginseng root. Kang Hu realized that the Dungeon of Limitless Mana was completely worth the risk. But he also realized that the dungeon would soon disappear because he killed the main boss. And as he expected, they were already waiting for him outside. Kang Do-hyun, smoking quietly, gathered the Eclipse sniper team and ordered them to wait. Once the dungeon disappears and Kang Hu comes out, you need to open fire. Suddenly there was a powerful burst of energy, and Kang Hu emerged from the shining portal. Kang Do-hyun immediately gave the order to shoot. But Kang Hu immediately shouted cutie, and a medium slime appeared in front of him, absorbing all the attacks, and began to increase in size. It turned out to be more useful than he thought. One of the snipers ordered to change tactics and use magic bullets. However, Kang Do-hyun merely waved his hand, telling the others to retreat. He was going to handle this himself. Kang Do-hyun attacked, sending a wave of destructive force towards Kang Hu, but he used teleportation and disappeared. Kang Do-hyun chuckled, understanding why Cha So-hee was so fixated on this guy. He was truly worth the hunt. Kang Hu teleported to a safe place where Zhang Yuri was already waiting for him. She screamed with joy when she saw him, but he felt the side effects starting to kick in. If it weren't for his enhanced stamina, he would have simply collapsed right now. Zhang Yuri worriedly asked if he was injured, but he assured her that he was fine and asked her to call Master K. Chan Yuri suggested going upstairs. She had news. She told Kang Hu everything she had heard about Violante and the reasons why her grandfather was looking for this particular plant. At that moment, Master K entered the room and confirmed her suspicions. He explained that he knew about the conversation, because in his own house he couldn't help but follow what was happening. Young Yuri was a little embarrassed and apologized, and Kang Hu also apologized if he upset him. Master K just chuckled, and he actually hid something about the Purification Guild to test Kang Hu. And now the result was obvious. The guy cleared the dungeon in one day and got Violante, which means he passed the test. The next day, when he was about to leave, Jung Yuri confessed that she had decided to stay here and help her grandfather. She wanted to personally find out what the Purification Guild was planning. Kang Hu wondered how perceptive the girl was. But how did Master K notice her eavesdropping so easily, and who was the mysterious guest she mentioned? He activated mana tracking and concentrated. Jung Yuri noticed his gaze and asked if there was something on her face. Kang Hu laughed and said no, he was just thinking. Then he said goodbye and reminded her to write if anything happened. Kang Hu left, thinking that now that he was working with Master K, he would be able to figure out the connection between the Purification and Violante. This was another step towards his goal of destroying Jiangsu Huan. Meanwhile, a post appeared online about a new huge dungeon that can only accommodate 100 people. The title read, "Recruiting people to attack the Dungeon of Justice of the Purification Guild." In the original story, Changshu Huan was able to achieve a lot thanks to this dungeon. He was just meeting Cha So-hee right now. He greeted her and noted that she must be tired from the journey. She was a former Eclipse employee. The girl waved him off, suggesting that they get straight to the point. Jiang Shuhuan said that he heard her following a guy and showed her a photo of Kang Hu. He said that he needed information about him and he was ready to pay because they work here on fair terms. Cha So-hee replied that she only wanted revenge. Chang Shuhuan smiled and said he liked it. He officially welcomed her to the Purification Guild. The girl began to tell. At first, she thought that there was nothing special about Kang Hu, but his speed surprised her. She assumed that his class was closer to assassins, but he used magical skills. Chang Shuhuan wondered if he had learned the skills from the spell books, but he looked at his phone, analyzing the information. Kang Hu stood on the outskirts of Paju City, looking at the entrance to the Dungeon of Justice. It was a massive raid dungeon that independent hunters were trying to clear. He was glad that he had arrived without incident, but he shouldn't relax. Meanwhile, Jin Hyo-ye seemed to accidentally end up in the same place. She asked to protect her, making cute eyes. He, of course, agreed, but he understood that all this was just a show. In reality, he only needed one thing, her body, to fulfill the conditions of the Madman constellation. He was going to eliminate her at the first opportunity. Kang Hu decided to move first, but suddenly his path was blocked by some self-confident guy. He said that Kang Hu wanted to grab all the awards for himself and advised him to keep a low profile. The remaining hunters rushed into the depths of the dungeon, thirsty for prey. Kang Hu just shook his head because they were acting like idiots. The dungeon generously distributed traps. Someone burned in the fire. Someone was pierced by knives. Someone simply fell into the abyss. 2 hours later, almost everyone was dead. The information provided by the Purification Guild turned out to be false, and they were simply used, sending them to certain death. Realizing this, Kang Hu suggested that the reconnaissance team move on. Soon they found themselves in a thick, impenetrable fog. Many people didn't want to go there, but Kang Hu knew that somewhere ahead there was a back door to the reward. He agreed to go only with Jin Hyo-yan and sent the rest to a safe place. When they were left alone, the atmosphere became noticeably tense. The sight of the fog was frightening, and Kang Hu carefully asked his companion if she had changed her mind. But she only reminded him that he promised to protect her. The girl's hand ended up on the guy, and she said that she would do whatever he asked. However, at this moment her hand was already ready and she was accumulating energy for the strike. The next moment, blood flared in the air, but it was her own. Kang Hu was faster and thrust the dagger straight into her side. He chuckled and said that he said hello to Kang Do-hyun. Jin Hyo-young couldn't understand how he had figured her out. Kang Hu explained that her attempt at flirting had seemed suspicious back at the club, and then doubts came into picture when he noticed that her abilities had no effect on the killer. She exploded with rage, activated her constellation, and pounced on him. Her body became covered in scales, and poison began to ooze from her pores. Kang Hu watched her movements carefully. She was an interesting opponent. He used defense and easily blocked her attack. Jin Hyo-yan was shocked. She watched his fight with Cha So-hee and knew all his moves. The guy activated the skill fire transcendence, and his dagger ended up under her neck. She realized that he was hiding this technique. Her lips twisted in irritation, because this little bastard was hiding his trump cards. However, there was no time to think. She tried to accelerate, but he dodged and immediately caught up with her. She tried to hide, but Kang Hu easily tracked her mana and slammed a punch straight into her face. Jin Hyo-yan was shocked. Why and how did he see her? She used the stealth skill, but he no longer had time for her. Shi Huan remained his main goal. At that moment, a portal appeared in front of Kang Hu and he entered it. Judge Elos was a mid-level boss, but his strength was in telepathic attacks. Kang Hu knew he had to deal with him quickly and get out of here. But suddenly someone grabbed his leg. This was not a living guy. He reproached Kang Hu for being the only one who survived, although he could have saved others. Soon, zombies appeared around, and it was more unpleasant than Kang Hu expected. He couldn't use Black Moon Strike yet, otherwise he would lose control. A crowd of dead people began to accuse him, putting pressure on his psyche. And among them was his dead friend from the very beginning, who also threw accusations in his face. Kang Hu was seething. He started screaming that he was not like Shi Huan, but the zombies called him a hypocrite and a coward. Their voices tore him apart from the inside. The world was collapsing around him, and Kang Hu himself was trembling, feeling reality blurring before his eyes. And so the story ended. Kang Hu from real life addressed himself. He began to tell the truth, which hurt the eyes. The guy was a loser and released a terrible story. The guy didn't want to accept reality in all these words, and until he rewrites the ending, nothing will end. Kang Hu grabbed his weapon and gathering all his strength thrust it into himself. At that moment he woke up still in the portal, but with a new understanding. His fresh Blood Eater constellation had activated, but he still didn't fully understand how to use it. The demon Alos continued to put psychological pressure on him, trying to break him. Suddenly a voice rang out in his mind and the devourer of fresh blood demanded that he be freed from the dimension thief. Otherwise he would not give his power. Kang Hu was surprised. He didn't think that the constellation could try to escape from control. The Dimension Reaver himself intervened, calling the devourer a red bastard and claiming that he was endangering the life of his owner. An argument ensued between them, and Kang Hu realized that his decision was inevitable. He agreed that after the battle he would free the devourer. Now the main task remained to defeat Elos. The guy killed the monster. Filled with death energy, his darkness level rose to 73 out of 100. The Wild Lord constellation was impressed by his determination and boosted it by 0.2%. Having received the reward and the distorted contract, Kang Hu understood that he was now connected to the devourer, and the choice had already been made. He signed the contract knowing that after this battle he would have to face a new challenge. Shi Huan and his team unlocked one of the doors and entered. The entire Purification Guild found itself in the final stage of the test. At this moment, Kwang Hyun turned to Shi Huan, wondering if they had chosen the right path. There was uncertainty all around and no one understood what was happening. Suddenly, the main boss, Argus, appeared in front of them. Everyone immediately prepared their weapons. Shi Huan removed the Western weapon ribbons from his neck and confidently declared that he and Kwang Hyun would go ahead and the rest would take care of the remaining work. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time and now he activated the Great Flame skill, wanting to test his limit. Meanwhile, Jin Hyo-yan was hiding somewhere, miraculously surviving. Just before she hit the ground, a strange mirror protected her. But what she saw in the reflection enraged her. Deep scratches on her face, a distorted image. Enraged, she threw away the mirror and screamed Kang Hu's name. The girl had no intention of forgiving him for this. Cha So-hee watched the situation with interest. It was important to her that Kang Hu and Jin Hyo-yan survived, but not for the sake of saving them. She herself wanted to kill them before anyone from the Purification Guild did. At this time, the guild continued to fight with Argus, and Shi Huan watched the work of his subordinates with satisfaction. He remembered Cha So-hee, but Kwang Hyun noted that she had disappeared right after the battle began. Meanwhile, Kang Hu was studying the contract nearby. He soon signed it, deciding that now everything would change. The corrupted contract allowed the exchange of a target's constellation within sight for one's own. The fresh Blood Eater turned to him, surprised by his decision, but Kang Hu reminded him of the agreement. For him, the battle with Elos was important because he dropped a unique item, Fighting Spirit, which could control even the constellations. The Dimension Thief intervened in the conversation, mocking Kang Hu, saying that he knew about his plan. However, the constellation used its power, and Kang Hu received a 5% increase in experience. The fresh Blood Eater began to panic, trying to convince Kang Hu to stop, but he calmly signed the contract. At this point, the connection with the Devourer was severed, and a new contract with the Conduit of Pure Darkness was made. Shi Huan's effects immediately began to cool down. Everyone looked at him in confusion, and he could no longer control his constellation. At this moment, Cha So-hee was preparing to burn her rival. She activated fire, but Jin Hyo-yan used her dash in time. However, something made her think because Cha So-hee was wearing the Purification Guild uniform. The rival enjoying the hunt mocked her, watching her escape. At that moment, Jin Hyo-yan noticed a huge red light in the distance. She became curious about what was going on there. But before she could do anything, Cha So-hee appeared behind her, declaring that the prey must not let down their guard. With these words, she attacked, and the last thing Jin Ha-yeon heard was her rival's voice promising to send her after Kang Do-hyun. A flash of karmic fire pierced her through and through. She fell down and Cha So-hee enjoyed the view. Meanwhile, Kang-hoo received a notification. His constellation was impressed by his determination and increased his experience by 5%. The whole world followed the news from the dungeon. The Purification Guild sent 120 hunters, but only 20 survived. Guildmaster Xu Huan urgently called a press conference. News portals were full of headlines. The hell of justice has turned into a real nightmare. Reporters vied with each other to report on traps, deaths, and to thank the surviving hunters for their sacrifices. The battle with the main boss reached its climax when he used the self-destruct skill, threatening to wipe everything around him into dust. Xu Huan and Kwang Hyun tried to save the people, but their strength was not enough. However, even in such a situation, their actions allowed at least someone to survive, and it seemed like a real miracle. The whole world watched the events, praising Xu Huan as a hero, because he risked his own life to save dozens of people. Kang Hu watched the spectacle and understood perfectly well that it was Xu Huan who had staged the massacre and then skillfully turned the situation to his advantage. He had no doubt that he would not leave things as they were and would find a way to strengthen his power. Indeed, Xu Huan soon announced that the judge would be defeated and the memory of the dead hunters would be preserved. Meanwhile, representatives of the Fortuna Guild from America, Yu Zhenghua and Casey Rex, entered the hall. Xu Huan concluded his speech by announcing that the Purification Guild would join forces with foreign forces to fight the Hell of Justice, promising compensation to all the affected residents of Seoul, and stating that this alliance would last a long time, conquering the most difficult dungeons. The crowd burst into applause. Kang Do-hyun also saw this news. Soon there was a knock on his door. The guest entered, bringing a suitcase. It turned out that the Purification Guild still managed to save several people. The assistant asked him if he had missed anything important, to which he replied that there had been some minor complications. If it weren't for one brooch, he would never have found the girl. The deceased Chin Hyo-yeon left behind this item, but they decided to simply throw away the body. However, the brooch turned out to be unusual and had a built-in camera. Kang Do-hyun connected her to the screen, wanting to know why Jin Ha-young gave her life. After watching the footage, he realized the terrible truth. The massacre was carried out by Xu Huan himself, and not the main boss as reported in the news. This discovery could bring good profits. He sent a recording to the Purification Guild demanding 100 billion won per month, threatening to leak the video to the media if he didn't receive the money. Xu Huan received this message and thought about it. The price of 100 billion a month did not seem so high to him. However, he noticed that the appeal came from the name of Eclipse's deputy leader. When he tried to find out if this was an order from the leader himself, he replied that he had nothing to do with it. The Eclipse Guild was founded to mine magic stones, and he wasn't even involved in the operation. Xu Huan decided that he needed to sort this matter out. In the meantime, he needed to regain his strength. He realized that he had been set up by Cha So-hee and that Kang Do-hyun seemed to have figured it all out long ago. Kwang Hyun entered his chambers, asking how he was feeling. He only asked if he had brought the potion from Violante. This potion temporarily stabilized the side effects of dark magic, but supplies were limited. Kwang Hyun explained that obtaining the necessary ingredients is extremely difficult. However, addiction to the potion occurs very quickly, and if weakness is shown, the consequences will be catastrophic. Despite all the difficulties, Xu Huan was confident that he could cope. Tomorrow, he had to conquer a new dungeon, and he had to demonstrate his strength. He also asked how things were going with Eclipse. Kwang Hyun reported that Shin Tae-seok had been tracking Cha So-hee for several days now, and would soon be tracking Kang Do-hyun as well. At this time in Daejeon, Yerin was discussing the situation with Kang Hu. After the last press conference, the Purification Guild was in the spotlight, and the hunting associations began to restore order in the provincial areas. Their first target was the Daejeon branch of Eclipse, led by Kang Do-hyun. Yerin asked Kang Hu if he understood what this meant. Kang Hu realized that Eclipse was now in the crosshairs of not only him, but also the authorities. He also realized that his past was haunting him. When Yerin invited him to join the operation, he accepted the offer because it was a chance to finish off Kang Do-hyun once and for all. However, Young Se-hyun countered that after Kang Hu's escape, the camp's security had been tightened and the mountain paths around it had been mined. He explained that the Eclipse Guild sees Kang Hu as a symbol and cannot just let him return. But Kang Hu was adamant. He said that he would go to the camp alone, even if the others did not support him. Pan Se-yeon warned that the risk was too great, but Pan Se-hyuk began to argue with him, claiming that such an opportunity could not be missed. They had a man inside the camp, but that didn't guarantee an easy victory. They needed 2 snipers, a good support, and a warrior who could withstand the onslaught on the front lines. Ye-rin suggested that she take on the role of the attacking mage, with Kang-hoo providing support. However, he said he had other candidates in mind. At that moment, he called Lee Hyun-suk, who was happy to hear from him. Kang-hoo got straight to the point, saying that he would need Park Dong-jae for a while. He also noted that Lee Hyun-suk is already short of manpower, but if he is really concerned about safety, he can send Kang-hoo with security. Lee Hyun-suk felt that something dangerous was coming, but trusting the guy, he agreed to send an escort who might be useful. Park Dong-jae immediately ran to his uncle, demanding an explanation, but he only said that he needed to call Butterfly since they had urgent business. Meanwhile, young Yuri received a call from Kang Hui, and the first thing she thought of was Violante. She was about to hand the phone over to her grandfather, but Kang-hoo stopped her. He didn't call about this. He had a special matter for her. The girl didn't hide her joy because she was pleased that he entrusted her with the task. At the same time, Kang Do-hyun contacted a certain person. He was indignant that he was taking so long to respond and demanded that they start acting. Otherwise, they would all be killed. However, the interlocutor coldly stated that he was only concerned with worthy people. Kang Do-hyun realized that this man was planning to leave Eclipse and go over to Shu-hwan's side. There was no doubt in his mind that he would betray them at any moment. Now Kang Do-hyun became the guildmaster, and the fate of everyone who was with him depended on his decisions. He realized that if he met this traitor, he would kill him without hesitation. Meanwhile, in America, the head of the Fortuna Guild, Casey Rex, learned that they were going to eliminate him. Jung Yuri, after discussing the situation with the guest and her grandfather, realized that her grandfather was unhappy. He did not understand how one could ask for help in destroying a criminal organization. The man standing nearby was about to deal with it himself, but his grandfather stopped him. He recalled that Jung Yuri had been hiding in Ground Zero for a long time, and if it weren't for meeting Kang-hoo, he would never have seen his granddaughter, so he decided to support her. The grandfather took his granddaughter to a separate room. Opening the door, he showed the girl a huge hall full of rare plants and useful ingredients. This was proof that young Yuri, and perhaps even Yoon Sang-mi, had already become part of Kang-hoo's team. At that moment, Yoon Se-hyun appeared and asked a question. Did Kang-hoo just call Lee Hyun-suk? He felt that he had become weaker lately, had lost many allies, and was not even able to get close to Kang Do-hyun. But now he was confident that together with Yoon Sang-kyu he would be able to defeat him. Ye-rin realized that it was time to discuss the details of the plan to destroy Eclipse. Meanwhile, a photo and headline appeared in the news about why the expedition to the Hell of Justice failed. The media claimed that it was the master of the Purification Guild who sacrificed his people. The comments were divided, with some believing it and others defending Shi-hwan. Kang Do-hyun saw the world abuzz with the news, but no one was doing anything concrete. He realized the way back was cut off and even the posts were deleted. He had only one option left to move forward. At that moment, his assistant burst into the room in a panic. They were in trouble. Right in front of the camp, a group of people from the Cheonan Guild appeared, and behind them were vehicles. Ye-rin wanted to do everything perfectly, so she ordered everyone to get ready. Kang Do-hyun knew that last time it was the Black Lions, but now they had a chance to deal with the Cheonan Guild. Only the leaders and a few close associates remained in the inner chamber, while everyone else was ordered to defend the main gate. Kang Do-hyun gave them permission to kill anyone who stood in their way, and guaranteed a promotion to anyone who brought in the fox's head. As the army headed to battle, one of Eclipse's undercover agents opened a small hole in the wall, allowing Kang-hoo's team to enter. The security cameras were turned off. Kang Do-hyun knew that they didn't have the fighters for this fight, and that the Cheonan elite were too strong. He needed time to prepare. At this time, fighting broke out in the area. The Eclipse Guild did not see any truly formidable opponents among the attackers, but their numbers were frightening. They decided that they needed to catch Ye-rin first before someone else did. Meanwhile, the girl's assistant landed unnoticed on the shoulder of one of the guards, after which she instantly eliminated him. No one understood where the shooting was coming from, but they realized that they were powerless against magic. At this moment, Ye-rin herself came out. She smiled and said that she could lead at least 100 fighters. She had enough mana for everyone. Kang-hoo also noticed that the battle had begun and knew it was time to act. The team dressed in prison uniforms to avoid attracting attention. As they passed by, they saw brutally beaten prisoners. Young Yuri was shocked and wanted to use the medicinal herbs, but Kang-hoo stopped her. He reminded them that their target was Kang Do-hyun. Young Se-hyun and Bang Se-hyuk had already taken up positions preparing to shoot. At this time, the camp guards were discussing among themselves that they had been ordered to drive all the scum to the main gate. Kang-hoo, disguised as a security guard, led the team forward. One of the blonde guards noticed the red-haired guy in their group and decided to teach him a lesson for his look, but Yoon Sang-mi stopped him. However, another guard grabbed her by the collar, looking at the number on her uniform, and remembered that yesterday he had killed a man with the same one. He started screaming, but at that moment, Pan Se-hyuk and Young Se-hyun opened fire. Now the team didn't have to hide. Yoon Sang-mi activated her power and Jung Yuri rushed into battle. Kang-hoo realized that he had no choice. It's time to clean up. Meanwhile, Kang Do-hyun suddenly attacked Cha So-hee, but she blocked the blow with her hand. He chuckled, saying that she thought he wouldn't notice her maneuvers. The girl had a tail behind her and was screaming at Kang Do-hyun in a panic, demanding an explanation. Why did he leave her? She was ready to sacrifice her life and he just used her like a tool. But Kang Do-hyun coldly replied that she was useful until she became useless. And if she came here to hear this, she wasted her time. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but suddenly she activated the skill, causing Kang Do-hyun's body to distort for a moment. She realized that he had fled to a previously prepared shelter, which meant that something important was hidden there. She was about to burn everything to the ground, but suddenly she noticed a vague silhouette in the distance. What did he have in mind? Meanwhile, the battle between the guards and Kang-hoo's group reached its climax. Park Dong-jae used his skill boost, and Kang-hui dashed between the enemies at lightning speed, cutting off their heads in one move. No one could figure out where he disappeared to until he suddenly appeared from another portal. He looked at the doll and realized that he had not made a mistake in choosing his allies. On the neighboring building, Jung Se-hyun and Pan Se-yeon supported the squad, eliminating enemies with sniper shots. The opponents who were still on their feet froze in shock. Kang-hoo destroyed dozens of people in seconds, almost without moving, but he had no intention of stopping. Kang-hoo activated mana tracking and suddenly ordered everyone to retreat. The next second, a fire dragon burst out from under the ground, breaking through the ceiling. Kang-hoo managed to shield Chung Yuri, and if it weren't for his premonition, they would no longer be alive. The attack was a mixture of Cha So-hee's fire and Kang Do-hyun's storm. They were obviously somewhere below. Looking at the destroyed surface, Kang-hoo realized that there was a hidden underground part that he didn't know about. He addressed the team, reminding them that their goal was to destroy Eclipse, and ordered them to join the Chongan mercenaries while he went after Kang Do-hyun. Before leaving, Jung Yuri handed him the Mad Solakium, a rare artifact she borrowed from her grandfather. She said to use it only as a last resort. Then he jumped down. The hot air hit his face and Kang-hoo couldn't see anything. Activating mana tracking, he noticed Cha So-hee, who was already approaching him. Their eyes met and he instinctively raised his weapon. However, she simply collapsed dead. He didn't have time to strike. The Dimension Thief said that stealing her skill would not be easy since she was already dead. But Kang-hoo had a different plan. Standing before him was Kang Do-hyun, a level 100 fighter associated with the 4 constellations: Indomitable Dedication, Masochist, Rider of Despair, and War Dog. These powers made him incredibly dangerous. Kang Do-hyun smirked and said that he thought Chonin was the one who attacked, but he was glad to see Kang-hoo. Suddenly, Kang-hoo's gaze fell on a giant flask filled with something strange. Kang Do-hyun chuckled and pointed at the crowd of creatures, half human, half mad. They were the result of his experiments. Kang-hoo didn't hesitate and used Shadow Step, instantly closing in on the enemy. However, Kang Do-hyun was faster. He intercepted Kang-hoo's weapon and smirked, because did he really think he could escape? Then he used stealth and appeared behind him. Kang-hoo foresaw this and activated his armor, but the enemy easily destroyed it and threw him aside. Kang Do-hyun said that he would make him into the perfect madman and lead this country. But Kang-hoo was ready. He summoned his trusty slime and used fire magic, followed by a powerful blow. Kang Do-hyun has fallen. And after a powerful blow, he looked not alive. Kang-hoo breathed a sigh of relief because he had won. But the Dimension Stealer intervened. This is not the end. His constellation cannot be subdued. At this moment, Young Se-hyun and the others finished the battle with the Eclipse Hunters. Shonen mercenaries took over the camp, freeing the prisoners. It seemed that the resistance had been suppressed. Now everything depended on Kang-hoo. If he can kill Kang Do-hyun, everything will end. But suddenly the enemy rose up. His body began to change. He chuckled, and as I said, the first step to survival is to stop being human. Kang-hoo watched in shock as Kang Do-hyun turned into a madman. And now they were about to face true horror. The place was filled with madmen, and Kang Do-hyun ordered them to go upstairs, claiming that there were valuable people up there too, clearly referring to Kang-hoo's team. Young Se-hyun was a little surprised by this meeting. These creatures were deadly weapons. Their strength combined inhuman endurance, developed senses, and blind devotion to the owner. They were created to showcase the true power of Shu Huan, those that even high-level hunters found difficult to defeat. Kang Hu understood that the fight with Kang Do-hyun was not over yet and continued to fight. As the enemy prepared to deliver the finishing blow, he suddenly jumped back, realizing that normal skills would no longer help. Kang Do-hyun mockingly asked if he was really going to continue fighting instead of saving his friends. But Kang Hu was adamant. He had to end this here and now. Using the bleeding strike, he heard a familiar sound, but the battle was not over yet. Kang Do-hyun broke free and threw Kang Hui back with force, causing him to drop his weapon. He then activated the blood flame, directing it straight at Kang Hu. He understood that even in a state of insanity, the enemy retains his sanity. Kang Do-hyun spoke about how the madmen were the result of experiments conducted in Russia aimed at creating enhanced hunters. He wanted to improve these technologies using available materials. He claimed to have surpassed humanity. Kang Hu angrily grabbed his weapon and challenged the enemy. At the same time, Yun Sang-mi and the others were having a hard time holding back the onslaught of the madmen. They saved each other, but barely managed. They needed to buy time because no one expected to meet such creatures here. Jong Yuri gathered her strength and released a powerful lightning strike, believing that Kang Hu would return as he had promised. Meanwhile, Pan Se-hyuk, breathing heavily, said that she had no choice. They had long been ready to die, but now their goal was to kill. Yerin suddenly came running, realizing that the most important thing was to survive until tomorrow. Kang Do-hyun asked Kang Hu if he should use the same skill he used against Cha So-hee, and he clearly underestimated his opponent because his regeneration was too fast. Kang Hu realized that the secret was in the magic stone in his heart. It was what allowed him to withstand the stress. That was probably why Cha So-hee wanted to tell him how to defeat Kang Do-hyun. The weak spot was right in front of him. Suddenly, Kang Hu felt weak and collapsed to the floor. The side effect of Violante had worked. He tried to reach for the weapon, but Kang Do-hyun threw it away. When Kang Hu ran out of mana, the enemy confidently declared that it was all over. However, Kang Hu did not give up. He used his last strength and struck Black Moon. It was incredibly powerful. The indomitable fighter constellation was stolen, and Kang Hu's level instantly rose from 111 to 154. The Mad Killer received 5 times more experience than usual. Dimension Stealer noted that Kang Hu was improving his skills too quickly and was sure that he would fall today. However, even the Masters of Chaos recognized his power. The Seeker of Pure Darkness also noted that the battle was brutal. Dimension Thief asked why Kang Hu waited so long when he could have used this skill right away. But he explained that he only had one chance. He couldn't use the power without knowing about the magic stone. Otherwise, he would have died. Now there was one more problem left: the madmen. Kang Hu realized that in this state, his team would not be able to hold them back. At this time, a desperate struggle was going on above. All forces were at their limit. The last madman prepared to attack, and Yun Sang-mi shouted for everyone to retreat. However, she was too exhausted. At this moment, Kang Hu broke through to the top and activated Black Moon. The madman has fallen. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and Kang Hu, as promised, announced that Kang Do-hyun was dead. Yerin came up to him and suggested that he take a rest, and he realized that his body couldn't take it anymore. Suddenly, Jong Yuri hugged him, her eyes shining with tears. Now all that was left was to go back. After the fall of Eclipse, the Cheonan Guild absorbed the Black Lion and became the main power in Daejeon. Pan Se-hyuk began investigating Eclipse's victims. The whole country was buzzing about the horrors of the prison camp. Yoon Sang-mi and Park Dong-jae returned to the abyss. Lee Hyun-suk noticed that his nephew had become stronger. This experience had toughened him up. Meanwhile, in Daejeon, near the headquarters, Kang Hu and Jung Yuri were talking. She passed on Violante's research to him. The main property of the plant is the temporary suppression of the side effects of the dark force. It may have originally been intended for Shi Huan, but now it can be used differently. Kang Hu accidentally suppressed 2 opponents at once. Jong Yuri was about to leave, but before that, she suggested to Kang Hu that they meet soon. He nodded, realizing that this was just the beginning. Yerin was with Pan Se-hyuk and comforted her. Kang Hu said he was very sorry for the loss of Jung Se-hyun. Meanwhile, Chang Shu-hwan was carefully studying the recording. He talked to his assistant about how their friends from abroad would help them. Their ranks included legendary figures such as Elizabeth Rowe from the UK and Vincent Meyer from the Netherlands. These 2 were a fearsome force in their own right. A saint who saves people and a bloodthirsty maniac who collects hidden skills is a strange but frighteningly effective combination. And Chang Shu-hwan announced the creation of 13 stars. Meanwhile, Kang Hu, having gathered his strength, prepared for a new battle. He met with Yu Do-hoon, who talked about the gathering of 13 stars. Chang Shuhuan went far beyond mere power. But Kang Hu had an advantage. He knew the plot. He knew how it was all going to end, and now that he had changed the course of events, it was time to play big. Japan was waiting for him. This will be the beginning of a new chapter in his story.